Hi, I'm Seth. I'm not an evil champion. I'm not a tournament champion. I don't even really play this game competitively. Simply, I am, like most of you, a fan of Tekken, a fan of the competitive scene. I like watching tournaments, I like commentating over them, and because of that, it makes me sad to see what's happening in the Tekken competitive scene in the Tekken World Tour. There have been a lot of allegations recently of cheating happening in the Tekken World Tour, and a lot of this talk has really been picking out steam. I myself have been looking into the cheating allegations in Tekken for a couple of months now. Cheating in Tekken, accusations of cheating with dojo system is not new. This has been going on for a very, very long time. But in my investigation into this, I have found that the problem with cheating, alleged cheating in Tekken, is a lot more rampant than anyone knows. I have compiled a 75-page document outlining all of my findings in the Tekken World Tour dojo system, the regional leaderboard, the allegations of cheating, the potential misconduct from players and TOs alike, and I will have that linked down in the description below. In this video, I'm going to be discussing all of the findings that I outline in that document. I'm going to be talking about multiple regions that have engaged in activity where they are not reporting DQs, they are manipulating the bracket, and at times there may be tournament organizers that are simply just lazy in their reporting. All the same, it still leads to problems with the Tekken World Tour system. It still leads to problems with the regional leaderboard. And because of how rampant and deep-rooted the problem is, there is no real good solution. There's no real fix to it, which is one of the things I want to highlight in this video and in the document that I have written. Past just that, though, Bandai Namco has also not been properly reporting dojo tiers. I suspect that the reason for this is because they do not have human reviewers that are actually reviewing any of the dojos that are submitted, and they are giving out points automatically to the competitors that compete in these dojos. There's going to be more information on that coming up soon. However, what I want to ask you all first is if you find this information valuable, if you like what comes out of this, I would please ask you whether you share this video or the Google Doc to share it. I'm making this simply because I want the dojo system to be better. I've always had problems with the Tekken World Tour, the regional system, the leaderboard system, the way that regions are defined, the entire way the system works is incredibly flawed. And I want to do this to try to spot change. I want to outline and highlight the problems that are with the Tekken World Tour dojo system, and I want them to be able to improve it. So whether you share this video, whether you share the Google document, whether you just share your thoughts on what is going to come out of this, I would appreciate anything that you could do to help get this information out. This is by far the biggest project I've ever undertaken in my entire life, and everything that I've done throughout this video and the document was done by myself, and I'm doing it out of a passion and a love for the game, and I truly, truly want everything to get better going into the future. So for those of you who may be watching who don't know the Tekken World Tour, the system, the dojo system, all of that stuff, let me explain to you some context behind how all of this works. So the Tekken World Tour is the year-long seasonal tournament series for Tekken. The main thing that we're going to be focusing on is one of the two ways that this tournament series works, which is the regional leaderboard. Basically, what happens with the regional leaderboard is that you are split into one of the 15 regions that are in the world. So we have America 1, which is like the United States and it's Canada. We have Oceania, which is like New Zealand, Australia, and Guam. And you'll compete at your local tournaments within your region to be able to gain points on the regional leaderboard. The amount of points that you gain is proportional to how many players are at your local tournament. So if you, for example, win a 64-player tournament, then you get 100 points. If you win a 96 or higher player tournament, then you get 150 points. ultimately, the placing that you have on the leaderboard is based on your 6 highest point placements of all of the local tournaments you go to throughout the year, and the player with the most points in a region goes on to the Tekken World Tour finals. The problem with this system is that there is no oversight from Bandai Namco. Bandai Namco does not officially sanction any of these local tournaments, which they refer to as dojos. And so this means that it's very easy to be able to manipulate your local dojo into looking like it has more players than it actually does, because Bandai Namco has no oversight from it. Everything in the regional system is based on the honor system. It's based on trust. And of course, in any competitive environment, relying only on trust with no oversight is a recipe for disaster. The second problem is how broad regions are. For example, America 1 comprises the entirety of the United States and Canada. This means that if one dojo in, say, I don't know, Florida, let's say Florida, is rigging their brackets, they're cheating, and they're trying to make their dojos appear to be higher tier than they actually are so that participants get more points, you cannot, if you are in Canada, for example, if you're in Quebec or something, participate in those dojo events that are manipulating their brackets, that are cheating to boost the players' points. The only people who are going to benefit from that within the region are people that are within that small area that can attend that tournament, and everyone else in the region, for lack of a better word, gets screwed because of it, and there's nothing that they can do. The only recourse other players in the region have that cannot go to these tournaments is to cross their fingers and hope that Bandai Namco does something about it. Bandai Namco, though, has been very hands-off throughout the entirety of Tekken 8 in the dojo system. There have only been 2 reported incidents of Bandai Namco taking action in the past 2 years. One of them was directly against the player for attending the wrong dojo events. That was last year. And this year, they have taken action on a specific region for not properly reporting the brackets, the DQs, the players, basically trying to cheat and manipulate the system. But this is the only instance of this happening. So the problem becomes, if you don't live within that part of the region and tournaments doing this, you basically have nothing that you can do to stop it. So with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about Bandai Namco, which is sort of the crux of everything that's going on. If Bandai Namco, which is something that you're going to understand the more we go through this video, was more hands-on and looked into and investigated these dojo events more, this problem wouldn't be as rampant and deep-rooted in the entire system as it currently is. I have looked into quite a few tournaments from Bandai Namco, and I have found discrepancies in how they report dojo tiers. You see, the way that dojo tiers work based on players is that you have 5 different tiers of dojos. You have 16 player, 24 player, 32 player, 48 player, 64 player, and 96 player. And what this means is that the event has to reach that amount of entrants after full DQs are accounted for. So full DQs in a tournament do not, or they count against, rather, the total number of participants or players in that tournament. So if you have, let's say, 50 players that have entered into your tournament, that have gone into the bracket, and 5 of them DQ, you're going to go, the amount of players that you're going to have is going to go around the 45. And because this is below the 48 tier, even though your tournament started at a 48 plus tier, after the DQs and after it drops down the 45 place, it becomes a 32 plus tier tournament. And this can have a lot of consequence in the amount of points that are won by the person who wins the event or gains points in the event. Again, in the case of a 96 player tournament, if you win that, you get 150 points towards the leaderboard. But if you win a 64 player tournament, then you only get 100. It's a 50 point difference. It's a 33% drop off. And so that means that if your tournament has initially 98, 99 players, then a lot of TOs are going to be incentivized if there are, say, 5 DQs to only report 2 or 3 of them so it doesn't drop below 96 players. These patterns, however, especially over the course of multiple tournaments, are pretty obvious to spot, and a lot of this document is going to be going over those very obvious instances of this happening. And if Bandai Namco more thoroughly reviewed tournaments and tournament series, then this wouldn't be so much of an issue. Then these dojos would get investigated, they'd be contacted, and they'd probably be punished for doing this. However, I have reason to believe that Bandai Namco not only does not investigate these dojos, but does not have any manual human reviewers at all. I have reason to believe that all of the reviews for the dojo events from Bandai Namco are done automatically. This comes from multiple discrepancies in terms of how dojos are labeled tier-wise. For example, there are some dojos in here that go down to 62 players, but are still labeled as a 64-player event. There are multiple instances of players dropping below the minimum threshold for a dojo, but then still being assigned the higher tier dojo status, but then other dojos that drop 1 below the number and are bumped down to the lower tier. This inconsistency points to me that there is either some sort of disjointment at Bandai Namco, whoever's human reviewing these, or you have human reviewers that are being lazy, or the process is automated. I lean more towards the process being automated, and I'll show you here now. This is Saudi E-League. This is a tournament series that is a little bit confusing to look at in StartGG because this is a ongoing tournament series that lasted for a couple of months, and this tournament series that lasted for this long, all of the tournaments throughout the course of a couple of months are all listed on this one StartGG page, so it can be a little bit confusing to look at. Where we're going to be looking at are these 2 tournaments right here. And that is going to be SEL Fighting Season 4 Major and SEL Fighting Season 4 Riyadh Clash number 1. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. Both of these tournaments were listed on the Bandai Namco Tekken World Tour leaderboards as being, as you can see, 96 plus person events. Now, these events, the name of this is wrong because it looks like that Raef here has just participated in the same tournament 3 times, but this is because this is the, as you can see, the homepage of this tournament series. Looking at the dates here, we can see that this is from October 3rd and this is from September 20th, which line up with the 2 dates on these 2. So these are the 2 tournaments that this is referring to. You may have already seen a discrepancy here, though. Again, you can see this is a 96-person dojo. However, this one, SEL Fighting Season 4 Riyadh Clash number 1, has 84 entrants. This is 12 less entrants than the 96-person threshold, yet it still attained 96-person status. You can see here, this is from October 3rd, 2025, and this was October 3rd, 2025. So this is the tournament that it is referring to. Now, the reason for this is a similar reason why this one has a discrepancy. You can see that this says it has 141 entrants, and you see September 20th, 2025, which is the same as it is here. This one looks like it has far more entrants than the required 96 to meet the dojo threshold. However, when you look at the actual bracket, and if you look at the standings, you'll notice that it says 82 players. Even though it says there's 141 entrants, there's only 82 players in this bracket. And when you click at view bracket, you can see that there's 83, A4, A5, A6, 87 players that are listed in the pools, yet 141 entrants. Before we focus on this one from October 3rd, let's focus on the one from September 20th. So this is possibly a mistake that could be made. Now, it would be a very lazy mistake for a human reviewer to make, because all you need to do is click on the bracket and see clearly this tournament goes below 96 players. But if you just click on it, you see that there's 141 entrants. You go, okay, that's good enough. Put it at 96 and then go home for the day, or whatever it is that the reviewer might do. This can make sense. And when you initially look at this, looking at how this says 82 players, this might not be where you're looking at. So even though it's very lazy and clearly this tournament has been misrepresented, it's a mistake that you can make. The other thing, when you click on Raef's profile as well, when you look, it says that he got first place out of 82 players, not 141. So clearly this tournament was grossly mislabeled. Now, one of the strange things about this tournament as well is it says that there's 83, A4, A5, A6, 87 players in bracket. But when you actually look at the standings, it says that there's 82 players. So which one's correct? It says there's 82 players. It says there's 87 players. That's a difference of 5 players. And that says there's 87 players and 141 entrants. So what's correct here? What's actually going on with this? And the other weird thing as well is that there is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DQs, right? There's a total of 5 DQs in winners. There's 4 DQs in losers, but those 5 DQs account for the difference in between the 82 players that's listed as being participants and the players that are in the bracket. So that's why there's the difference there. But how does this difference between 87 players or 82 players and 141 entrants come to be? That, personally, I don't know. But whatever the case, it's some problem with StartGG, and that's what it's seeing. So now let's move over to the Season 4 Riyadh Clash number 1. And this one doesn't have that problem. I mean, you look at it, right when you look at it, it says there's 84 entrants. You look at the bracket, it says there's 78 players here. It says there's 84 players here. No matter how you cut it, this tournament does not have 96 plus players. No one who's human reviewing this tournament is going to look at this and then say that it's a 96 plus event. At best, it's going to be labeled as a 64 plus event. The problem is that if you go to the attendees and you look for Raef in the attendees, Raef is listed in this tournament, SCL Fighting Season 4 Riyadh Clash number 1, as getting first out of 115 players. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was a human reviewer for the dojos and I was determining the placement for the dojos, this is not where I would be looking. I would not be looking at an individual player's StartGG profile for the event and then look at this number specifically. But that seems to be how they got this number, because this is the only number, this is the only time where this number goes above 96 on the entire StartGG page. And you can see here as well, it's also listed here as getting first out of 141. But if I actually click on this, it says that it's first out of 78th place. So there is something going on with this particular tournament on StartGG that has really messed with the numbers. And what exactly has gone on here, why this is happening, I don't know. I assume it's something with them generating the bracket before people couldn't enter anymore. And because of that, you had players who entered into the tournament after the bracket was generated. They didn't regenerate the bracket, or they didn't redo it. And because of that, you had a lot of people that entered into this tournament who couldn't have participated because the bracket had already been generated. And yet, despite that, this again was labeled as a 96-player event. To me, this indicates that there are no human reviewers for any of the dojos. If there was a human reviewer for this, I cannot see how a human reviewer, when looking at this tournament, would ever look at this as a 96-player event. The only way that they could have looked at this tournament and labeled it as a 96 player once again is to click on attendees, is to click on someone who had registered and played for this tournament, where there are a lot more ones that don't pertain to the actual dojo event that's happening, and then look at, once again, if I put in Raef's name, and then look at this number specifically. I don't think that happened. Instead, what I think is happening is that Bandai Namco has some sort of automated software to look at the players' connected .gg profiles, look at the events, the dojos that they have attended, and then scrape this specific number from this attendees page for the specific tournament, and then apply that both to the dojo and the dojo tier, and then apply their points for the tournament based on that. That would be how this page knows that he got first in this tournament. It's not a human reviewing the top 8 bracket, distributing the points manually. Instead, it's some sort of automated process that's determining how big the dojo is, what place the player got, scraping all of the data automatically from this automated process, and they use this specific page to automate that process. And this would explain a lot of things. This is going to explain later on in this video and in the document that I wrote on why exactly you have so many instances of tournaments being very obvious with some sort of alleged cheating, but Bandai Namco isn't doing anything about it. One thing that has become very well known is a tournament that Raef played in that was using AI generated names. And a lot of people were wondering, how can someone look at this and think that it's legitimate? And the answer probably is that no one's looking at any of these dojos. No one's actually verifying these dojos. And that opens up the floodgates to abuse when this becomes known. Because if you can manipulate the .gg page in order for your tournament to look like this, then you can make your 20-person dojo event pop up on here as a 96-person event. And with how hands-off Bandai Namco has been about enforcement and how little that they actually review any of these tournaments, again, this was back in September and October, and they are still to this day labeled as 96-player events, even when they're not. So because Bandai Namco is very hands-off, they don't really interfere, they don't investigate anything, this is just ripe for abuse. And anyone can abuse this fact. Another way to hint at this being the case as well is when you look at any time this says points ineligible, it's always because they didn't stream the tournament. That is the only reason. It is only because of broadcast. Here you got broadcast, here you got broadcast. The only time if you click on any of these points ineligible, it is only for broadcast. It is never for any other rule violation. And that is because there is no human reviewers of Tekken World Tour events. To continue on this point, here's an example from the MEA3 region. He is yOReDz. He is currently the #1 player in the MEA3 region, and he has a tournament down here, TWT 2025 CGC KWT Second Dojo Athlete, that is labeled as a 96+ player event. But when we click on the .gg page here, you can see that it has 98 entrants in the bracket. It is listed as having 98 players, so for some reason, .gg, unlike the R one, didn't count the DQs. And when the bracket loads, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 disqualifications. And the losers, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So all of these were full disqualifications. These weren't partial disqualifications, which normally wouldn't count against a Tekken World Tour dojo's participation numbers. So that would bring this event down to 92 players, which is below the 96-player threshold. But despite that, it was labeled as a 96+ person event. So this event should have been labeled as a 64-player event because there's only 92 players here, but it wasn't. For some reason, it was mistiered as a 96-player event. And because of that, yOReDz got 50 points that he shouldn't have gotten in his regional leaderboard. Here's another example, RGN from the Asia 3 region. He played in a tournament called Smash That Trash The Last Dive. Amazing name for a tournament. This was labeled as a 64 plus tier dojo event. And if we look at the bracket in the Tekken 8 singles, it has 69 players. And we will count the DQs here. I know it off the top of my head. It is 7, but you see 1, 2, 3. And again, just look at the losers so that you can see these are full DQs. Hopefully my head isn't in the way. No DQs on this one. 4, 5, 6, 7. And that brings the amount of participants down to 62, but it was labeled as a 64 plus tier dojo. Here's another one from Noel, who has garnered a lot of controversy recently. We will be talking about Noel in this video. There is one event here that also had this problem, Hadouken Capital Gamer 3. You can see it has 72 players here. If I click on the bracket, and again, we're going to count the DQs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that brings it down to 63 players. It was labeled as a 64 plus tier dojo. Now, if this whole thing about looking at like dojos and being like, oh, it has 1, 2 players under the threshold seems nitpicky, just for the sake of completion in this, I want to show some examples of how dojos should be knocked down tiers. And there's this one in Pakistan, Fury Arena I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this. This is labeled as 64 player dojo. If we go to the .gg page, then we see that there are 102 initial entrants for this tournament. And if we look at the DQs, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so that brings the amount of total entrants in this tournament down to 95. So this is a tournament that is one person under the threshold for being a 96-player dojo, and it was bumped down to a 64-player dojo. So the question then is, how does this dojo, who has 95 players, get 64-player status, but then a dojo with 94, 93 players gets 96-player status? It's wildly inconsistent in how the dojo tiers are placed, and this has serious effects on the Tekken World Tour leaderboard, as you can imagine. There are more examples of this too. For example, here's Victim of Ritual, Victimo's profile. He's the #1 player in the America 1 region, and he went to this event, F2 Con 2025, which was labeled as a 32-player dojo. It had initially 50 entrants, and it had 1, 2, 3 disqualifications, which brought it down to 47 players. And instead of having 48-player dojo status, it got bumped down to 32. So you can see from these examples that the discrepancy, the inconsistency in labeling dojo tiers is absurd. And again, this has real consequences. But the question I'm going to ask, without even talking about that stuff, because I'm sure you all can understand without me saying why this is a problem, is how can competitors look at this and then look at the dojo system with any sort of competitive integrity whatsoever? We are randomly assigning dojo tiers based on participants. It is a complete shot in the dark if a dojo has a higher tier status than it should, or if it gets knocked down for being 1 player under. How can you have a competitive environment like the Tekken World Tour where stuff like this is happening? This goes beyond just there not being human reviewers, this being able to be abused and all of this other stuff, but this gets into a whole new territory now of people who are getting robbed out of points, or they are getting robbed out of the Tekken World Tour leaderboard placement or their ability to be able to compete, not because of their fault, not because anyone else is cheating, but purely because Bandai Namco has no consistency at all in labeling these dojo events. And so it's because of these factors that we have to call into question every single dojo in the Tekken World Tour. We have to call in the question every leaderboard placement, everyone that is participating in the regional leaderboards, because we can deduce from this, these very obvious examples that are extremely easy to see, and these inconsistencies, that Bandai Namco is not doing investigative work. They're not verifying dojos, even for the top players, the number one players in the region. Usually there would be more scrutiny for these players. If you have someone that's like 25th on the leaderboard and they get points for like a 24-person event that should have been a 16-person event or whatever, we don't need to go that deep into the investigative work and that many man hours, because it's not going to really have an effect on the rest of the tour, the rest of the regional leaderboards. However, when you have this happening in the top level with the top players in multiple instances, when you have players at the top of the regional leaderboard or the Tekken World Tour leaderboards, that is at minimum things that should be verified by Bandai Namco with human reviewers to make sure that everything is correct. The fact that they treat the number one players in the region, that they treat the top 20 on the Tekken World Tour leaderboards the same as Timmy, who's 30th on the leaderboard, and he got 5th at his 16-person event, is asinine. It's ridiculous, but that is what they are doing in effect. They are having the same level, and not in a good way, of scrutiny and care for people that are at the number one spot as with people that are on the number 30 spot and aren't even really trying to compete. And that is a really, really bad precedent. So now we're going to move on to the individual regions, and we are going to be looking at the number one player in these individual regions. I'm going to be talking about these regions in order from what I most think should be looked into by Bandai Namco to what I least think should be looked into by Bandai Namco. What I'm going to say, though, is twofold. One, we should not assume that players in these regions are cheating. While there may be evidence of misconduct and there may be very compelling evidence of intent, that is something for Bandai Namco to decide. I don't think it's right for us to go on a witch hunt and assume that players are cheating when we have no concrete proof. How would you feel if a bunch of people, if the entire Tekken community started labeling you as a cheater for what someone else did that you didn't know about and you know you weren't cheating? It would feel awful, right? And because of that, we shouldn't be doing that to other people ourselves. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be presenting the evidence as I know it and I see it, and I'm going to hope that it gets to Bandai Namco and allow them to be able to make a decision themselves. The other thing that I'm going to be doing because of that is I'm not going to be referring to the individual number one player in the region. Instead, I will be referring to the region itself, because the problem really lies within the region, within an individual within the region, if there is alleged cheating, of doing this, and it's not on the player. And putting everything on the player detracts from the actual problem that's going on. And on top of that, it also allows the actual perpetrator, the actual person of wrongdoing, to avoid consequence. So because of that, I'm not going to be referring to the player themselves when I don't have to. Now, that exception is going to be here for the Asia 1 region because the player in question is very important to this investigative report. So the number one player in the Asia 1 region is this player, DChingiz. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. And this player, on his Tekken World Tour profile, the dojos that he's played in, you can see are mostly on challenge, and he has gotten first play in almost every single one of these events that he's gone to. The big problem that is with DChingiz is that most of these events have exactly the amount of players required for the dojo and no DQs. That's a very consistent thing that you see throughout all of these tournaments, is that they have just at or just above the required amount of players for the dojo tier, and they have 0 DQs. Maybe if they have DQs, they have like 1 or 2, but it's always just enough to be able to stay above the initial tier of the dojo. There are also times with the brackets on challenge that the players are listed as going 0, -1, which usually indicates a disqualification or some sort of automatic win, or if the player won but didn't report the score. The other problem with listing players as going 0, -1 is that we don't know if it's a DQ. We don't know if it was just a match loss for some reason. We don't know why they do that. And so you can't assume if it's not marked as a disqualification, that is a disqualification, which could be an attempt to mislead any human reviewers, if only there was any, into not realizing that those are DQs. But before we get into that, let's first look at the .gg page for Comic-Con Astana. It is the only tournament that was hosted on .gg. And this is really going to help us understand the pattern with a lot of these tournaments, because they all fall into the same pattern. You can see there are 99 entrants in this tournament, and when you look at the pools, there are very few DQs. Here we have 2 partial DQs of players who up in the winner's side went 0-2 and 0-2. We have here, again, 1 partial DQ here, and then they went 0-2 in losers. But again, no DQs, no DQs, 2 partial DQs once again, but not full DQs. We have 1 single DQ from this player, Citrus, and that's it. And also, notice the amount of 0-2s in these brackets as well. 0-2s, especially early in the bracket, is a really good indicator that DQs are not being reported correctly. This is a very unusual amount of games to just go 0-2. Because of how seeding works, players should be at times close to one another before they get eliminated. If you have a lot of 0-2s early in the bracket, that sort of indicates, when you have enough of them, that the players weren't actually there and didn't actually play. And you see that, again, there are like this bracket. Look how many 0-2s. There was 1 game that went 1-2. A single one. Look at this one. Not a single game in winners went 1-2. This is the only game in this entire bracket that went 1-2. And so when you look at this, once again, there's only 1 game here that went 1-2. When you look at this, it becomes a very clear indicator that a lot of there is misreporting of DQs, right? And the other thing as well, because there's only 1 full DQ, that brings the total effective amount of participants in this tournament down to 98. If the partial DQs were also accounted for, like here, we have 3 partial DQs. This is one of the most ridiculous brackets I've ever seen in my life. You have this game where this player went 2-0, and then in winners quarters, this player, Fisher, disqualified. And then in winners semi, the person who won 2-0 in round 1 just decided, you know what? I'm going to go for a bathroom break and never come back. And then they come back and loses quarters, and then they get out of the tournament 1-2. So they were here, and then they got a bye, and then they just never came back. But then they still came back within like 5 minutes of being disqualified to be able to play in losers quarters, and then they lost. It just doesn't, like, it doesn't make sense. So then you have this person, La Passion, who goes 2-0 in round 1, and then when his quarters, they're just like, I'm gonna go. I'm leaving, I'm done. And so they DQ, but then they come back in losers, and they play in losers, and he goes 0-2. And you have the same game with Fisher, who DQ'd against a whack. So they, again, they are the higher seed in the bracket. They just DQ. They just don't play. But then they do and loses and goes there. You see how, like, I don't think I need to go on, but you see how strange this entire thing is, right? So this is, again, a common thing that you see throughout this, but this is a very clear indicator of disqualifications not being reported properly. So now let's go over to some of the brackets in Challenge. And so let's look at Almighty Running 4. Almighty Running 4 has exactly 64 players. And in this tournament, you can see that there is not a single listed disqualification. Not one. Not one disqualification this entire tournament. So 64 players signed up for this tournament. Every single one of them made it, and every single one of them played. This just simply does not happen. This is not normal for a bracket with 64 players to not have any disqualifications. Now, when you look at one tournament, this can happen. It's improbable, but it can happen. But where it becomes a pattern and where it becomes suspicious is when multiple tournaments do this. And so we have this tournament that's doing it, and we have the one on StartGG, the Comic-Con tournament that's also doing this. If we look at Almighty Running 3, this was listed as a 96-person dojo. It has 99 players, but again, not a single disqualification. And you know if it's a disqualification on challenge if there's a strike through the name. Instead, what we see is players going -1-0. You see it here. You see that's one player here. You see another one here, so that's 2. You see another one here, so that's 3. So that's exactly 3 players, which would bring, after that, if you count those as DQs, down to exactly 96 players. But even regardless of that, these players aren't being marked as DQ'd. When a player goes 0-1, that doesn't necessarily mean DQ. That could mean that the score wasn't reported correctly, a player was giving a win. Whatever the reason for it is, this doesn't necessarily indicate a DQ. And so by marking a player who DQ'd is going -1-0, that could potentially, maybe you can make an argument that is the tournament organizers trying to mislead someone into thinking a DQ isn't actually a DQ. And also, if you're just glancing at the bracket, this is a very difficult thing to just spot if you're reviewing this. And if you have to review who knows how many dojos, who knows how many tournaments in a day, if, again, you're assuming you're a human reviewer, you're going to look at this, you're going to glance at, do I see any DQs? Control F, DQ? Nope. Okay, move on. And so that is another problem with what's going on with this. And again, you can see here, Almighty Running 2, 65 players. Again, this was labeled as a 64-player event, and no DQs. You have multiple players here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 players listed as going -1-0, which we can interpret as being DQs, which would bring it to 60, but these weren't marked as DQs, and you can see that they're marked here in losers as well, but these weren't marked DQs because they were not properly marked. So if we assume that these are DQs, which we should, this should have been a 48-person event, but because of how they labeled the DQs, it changes how a reviewer or Bandai Namco's automated system looks at this and says, yeah, there were 65 players and 0 DQs, which could again be an attempt to mislead. And if it is, well, it worked. And so we've looked at enough of these events from DChingiz to see that there is a pattern that's going on. There are exactly the amount of entrants that you need for the dojo status, or just above an abnormal amount of disqualifications, and that is reason to look into these events. However, there are a couple of more things about this that open up a new door of possibilities, let's say. One of these things is this funny little button here. This is the log button. This is going to tell you who reported scores for the tournament. And so, if I click on this log button, and we look at the logs for this tournament, Almighty Running 4, you're going to notice something very interesting. The number 1 player in the Asia 1 region has been reporting scores for this tournament. In fact, it's not just a couple of scores. It's almost all of them. Almost every score that was reported by DChingiz, the number 1 player in the Asia 1 region. I counted the amount of reports that he made in this log. There are 3 parts in this log that are create the tournament, start the tournament, and ended the tournament. And this other person in the log, so that brings the log total down to 129. And this person reported 12 games, which means DChingiz reported 117 of 129 games in this tournament that he is listed as also winning. And this also means that the reason why there are 0 DQs reported is because DChingiz himself did not report the DQs because he reported all of the games at the beginning of the tournament. Further, if we look at DChingiz's profile, we can see that if we look at tournaments, he is listed as an admin for Almighty Running 4 and Almighty Running 3. And if we look at Almighty Running 3, while it's not as egregious, you're going to see he is also reporting scores for this tournament. Not at the same frequency, but he is also reporting scores for this one as well. Now, this behavior seems to have been limited to these 2 events, but still, this is simply not okay. I don't think I need to explain why. But it gets a little bit deeper than that as well. You see, there's even more to uncover about the Asia 1 region. If I go back to Almighty Running 4, and I look at this player, Fazbear. Fazbear here also is an admin and organized all of these challenge tournaments, all of them. And if we look at the Comic-Con Astana 2025.gg page, the admin for this tournament is none other than Fazbear himself. But it gets even deeper than that. You can see that Fazbear, next to his name, has this thing that says Lotus. And if you look at Fazbear's Twitter, it says he is the player and owner of Lotus Esports FGC, which is an esports team from Kazakhstan. And if you look at DChingiz's Twitter profile, it says Lotus Esports Tekken 8 player. So this may be the reason and give us motive as to why the brackets have allegedly not reported the DQs, have inflated the numbers, have inflated the Tekken World Tour dojo number, and importantly, why DChingiz was given admin role in Almighty Running 3 and Almighty Running 4, the last 2 tournaments of the Tekken World Tour regional leaderboards, which gave him an extra 200 points, firmly placing him above Fardi. It is very clear and undisputable motive and evidence that there is something happening in the Asia 1 region that needs to be investigated, regardless of if there is cheating or not happening. This is not okay. There is clear, irrefutable evidence that DChingiz was given admin role in the tournaments he played in and won, and that he was messing with the leaderboards. He was responsible for the leaderboards, and because of that, he is the one responsible for not properly reporting DQs. Now, could it be that someone else was using his account? Yes, sure. That is possible. Could it be that DChingiz himself was not the one that was actually making those reports and it was someone else using his account? Yes. But why was his account given admin role? Why was his account able to do this? Why wouldn't someone else be using their own account or a different account? Why would they be using DChingiz's account? Why would that be happening? This is something that needs to be looked into. There's just no refuting it. There's no arguing with it. The evidence is very clear and concise. It is very laid out. And because of that, Bandai Namco needs to look into this. What is happening here simply is not okay. And there is no argument you can make that it is okay. Now let's move on from Asia 1 and let's start talking about what is a little bit more in the forefront when it comes to this scandal and these allegations, and that is Raef and Allidar. Now, Allidar is who really kind of kicked this whole thing off. There have been a lot of allegations and finger pointing from the entire competitive scene at Oceania, at Allidar, and at Guam. And the evidence that is presented for both him and Raef are very damning. There is a lot to talk about, and there has been a lot that has been ongoing since season 1 with Allidar that is important to talk about and is important for Bandai Namco to investigate. At minimum, even if Allidar and Guam as a whole have not done anything wrong, there's still an explanation that is owed by Allidar, by the Guam community, and especially from Bandai Namco. But what I'm going to reiterate is that we don't have clear evidence that either of these players were knowledgeable or complicit in what's happening in their regions. I don't think it's right to start dogpiling on and attacking these individual players when we do not know for a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, that these players were complicit. That is for something for Bandai Namco to decide. What we should be doing as players and a community is highlighting and presenting the evidence of what could potentially be going on in these regions, present that, and then have Bandai Namco do an investigation themselves. And if we can't trust Bandai Namco to do that, if we can't trust Bandai Namco to be able to do their own investigative work, make their own decisions, make their own judgment, and make a statement, then the entire Tekken World Tour dojo cannot be seen as a competitive event. And at that point, we shouldn't be putting any weight on the Tekken World Tour, the regional leaderboard, the entire system as a whole, because at that point, the system is so far broken that the issue extends beyond just these two players. Most of the information in this section isn't going to have been uncovered by me. It's going to have been uncovered by other Tekken players, other people who have been investigating and reporting on this, and I feel like it's important to also highlight other people's efforts into uncovering what's going on with the Tekken World Tour. And so we're going to start with Raef, and I'm going to read out this Twitter post from Black Panther that outlines the issues with Raef very well. I'm raising serious concerns regarding Raef's Tekken Dojo events and their impact on Tekken World Tour qualification. Upon examination, it is obvious that he heavily inflated the numbers, leading to a maximum number of points. During Raef's Jeddah Dojo 4, a large number of StartGG accounts were created simultaneously. These accounts follow an identical AI-like naming pattern with no meaningful variation. The chances of over 50 people signing up with these similar names is extremely low. I can tell you, I counted the amount of accounts that were like this. It was well over 60. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 62 and 64. There are so many that it's hard for me to be able to accurately count them, but it's within that neighborhood. It's more than half. That's the point. Additionally, the event shows 0 disqualifications despite being a fully populated 96-player dojo, which is highly unusual. Multiple notable players who consistently place well in most tournaments got very unusual placements. What makes the situation more concerning is that the same naming patterns reappear in a dojo held 2 weeks earlier using different accounts but identical names. The similarities are difficult to overlook. You have identical name structures, very consistent formatting, and clear signs of auto-generation with no attempt to mask. These details are easily verifiable by reviewing the brackets and the attached screenshots. The fact that these dojos were approved at all shows either gross incompetence or an intentional sweeping under the rug of the situation in order to avoid negative press towards the Tekken World Tour. If nothing is done about this blatant cheating, it will eliminate all integrity from the Tekken World Tour. An average person looking at this would know it's blatant cheating. Shadow should take the place as the person currently sitting at 21st place, which is something that we will talk about, and then you can review this event yourself. And then he attaches screenshots of the AI-like names, the amount of attendees being exactly 96, and then a ChatGPT generated response to creating a bunch of names for a Middle Eastern gaming tournament. I will overlay this on screen now because I know I'm going to be covering it up. But importantly, down here, animal and nature inspired names that the AI came up with, Sand Viper and Desert Wolf, are both participants in this tournament. Now, what I'm going to reiterate here when talking about this, when it comes to the fact that, quote, the fact that these dojos were approved at all shows either gross incompetence or intentional sweeping under the rug of the situation. An average person looking at this would know it's blatant cheating. What I'm going to bring up again is that there is clear proof from other tournaments that Raef has attended that there is no human oversight or verification of these dojos, and that's why this is able to happen. There is no humans that are looking at the brackets. There are no humans that are actually looking at this. It is all automated, and that explains why something like this could happen and why it's happened multiple times. And if we look at the Start.gg page for this Jeddah 4th dojo, you can see again exactly 96 attendees. And like he said, there are 0 DQs. And you can see that the amount of AI names here is ridiculous. Thunderpalm and Rage Crush. Apparently this game went 2-1, which also indicates to me that there is also an attempt to hide this by making games here of players that clearly aren't real go 2-1 instead of 2-0 and just omitting the disqualification. Again, you have Steel Lion and Lightning Vortex, Shadow Drift Iron Wolf, Iron Palm, and Night Strike, again going 2-1 here. And it just goes on and on and on. And when you look at the attendees page as well, you're going to notice this too. You have players like, maybe not here. Here we go. Shadow Fist, Desert Wolf, King Rage, Falcon Axe, Night Jin, Iron Palm, Sandstorm, Gym Master. They're all just in a line. And when you look at the date that these accounts were created, November 2025, November 2025, November 2025, I'm just clicking on random ones, November 2025, and that's also an indicator that these are not real people. But again, because there's no human verification of the dojo events, this is how the players are able to get away with this, even though when you look at this, these are very clearly not real people. Except for maybe Q8 Uwu, because who would come up with that? Anyway, besides Bandai Namco's incompetence, this is the main allegation put out against Raef. And Black Panther makes a point that Shadow should be the one who is qualified for the Tekken World Tour finals. But is there validity in that? Well, Raef right now is 12th on the leaderboard with 1,530 points. He is firmly on the leaderboard. It's not like he's at the bottom of the leaderboard and one little change would make him go down to 25th place or whatever. And also, it's important to say that we don't know if Raef was aware of this. If we look at another Jeddah Dojo event like Jeddah 3rd Dojo, which was deemed points ineligible because it wasn't broadcast properly, and we look at this event, it has 107 entrants, and you're going to notice when looking at this that you have some players like Red Scorpion here, but at the same time, there is far less of these AI-generated names and far more real people. At least we can assume that they are real people. And so because of that, there is not a consistent pattern with Jeddah Dojo doing this to such an extreme degree that a competitor would notice it. Yes, we have players like Desert Wolf in here, and the Jin E, and there was another one up here as well, Stormbreaker. But again, there is not half of these players that share this same naming convention, this same problem. And so because of that, it's reasonable to assume that Raef didn't know about this up until Jeddah Dojo 4. And then when Jeddah Dojo 4 happens, what does he do about it? You know, if we assume that Raef isn't knowledgeable or complicit in what has happened at this event, then what do you do about it if you are the player? Now, you can say that he should make a public statement, he should call them out, but that's not really fair to anyone. It's not fair to put Raef in that position where he feels the need to make a public statement about this and bring down his own local scene, especially if there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. And then you can say, well, what is there going to be at you don't know about? And we don't know. There might not be anything. There might be a reason for this. It might be that these AI generated names are real people that don't have Start.gg accounts. We don't know. But it's not to defend this. This absolutely shouldn't happen, but there might be a reason for why Raef is doing this, and also putting him in that position just makes this worse. What I would do if I was in Raef's position is report it to Bandai Namco Esports directly. Don't make a public statement and let them make the final decision and let them investigate. And we don't know if Raef has done that. We don't know how knowledgeable he is. And if he is knowledgeable, we don't know if he has done anything about the situation. So we shouldn't necessarily just say this one event that he participated in just disqualifies him from it entirely because, again, we don't know what he's knowledgeable about. He shouldn't be punished for participating in an event that he didn't know was doing this, and he probably didn't know was going to do this before he showed up. So then the next question becomes, well, what about getting rid of the 150 points that he got from this dojo? And that is something that is completely fair to do. Raef probably shouldn't have got 150 points for winning this dojo. This dojo should probably be stricken from the Tekken World Tour leaderboards entirely. But if Raef lost these 150 points and didn't take his second place highest point total, or his fifth highest point total, I should say, sorry, which is 100 points, then he would be down 150 points on the leaderboard, and that would put him to 1380. And just to give a little bit of context here, right now, Shadow's on the leaderboard with 1230, so that would not take him off of the Tekken World Tour leaderboard. However, another important point to point out here is that when one event is deemed as having broken the rules, as we saw in the MEA 3 region recently, all of the events that were organized by those admins are also deemed ineligible for points and stricken from the Tekken World Tour leaderboards. And so all 4 Jeddah dojos here would also be in violation of that, which means he wouldn't get points for this one, number 2, which is here, and then number 1, which is here. Now, of these, one of them was already deemed ineligible for points, so it doesn't matter. And one of them is Raef's 5th placement on the Tekken World Tour leaderboard. And so that means these 2 dojos specifically would bring him down 300 points if they were completely stricken. And again, if we don't consider his 6th and 7th place dojo placements, he would be down 300 points, which would bring him down to 1,230 points, which is tied with Shadow in 21st place. But if we include his 6th and 7th placements, it is going to be this one, which gives him 10 points, and it's going to be wherever this other dojo is, this one that gave him 50 points. He has no other dojos he's participating in. These are the only 2 that would give him 60 points, which means he would be 60 points up on the leaderboard. So even if you take out all of the Jeddah dojos from the Tekken World Tour, Raef is still in the top 20 and Shadow is still in 21st place. The main thing this would affect is Raef's seeding in the Tekken World Tour finals. And yeah, that should happen. His seeding should be affected, but it wouldn't make Shadow the one of the qualifying players for the Tekken World Tour. However, there is one other thing that does, and that are these events. The events that were labeled incorrectly by Bandai Namco Esports because of their automated review. To recap, if we look at this event, Saudi E-League Fighting, this leads us to a hub for this event that took place over the course of multiple months, and this specific tournament that was deemed a 96-player dojo that Raef participated in, you can see it's from September 20th. So if we go down to the event from September 20th, it's this one. And if we view the bracket here for this event, sorry, it's not view the bracket. Yeah, if we click on overview, we see there's 141 entrants, but 82 players. And when we click on the actual bracket itself, we see that there's 83, A4, A5, A6, 87 players, meaning this should have been labeled as a 64-player dojo. And because of that, Raef Shuren got 150 points. He should have got 100 points from this. So if we take away another 50 points, then Raef is only 10 up on Shadow for qualifying for the Tekken World Tour leaderboards. But this didn't happen once, it happened twice. It also happened with this tournament, which was on October 3rd. And so if we go to that tournament as well on October 3rd, the more egregious example of this, if we click on the overview here, we can see this 84 entrants, However, it's labeled as a 96-player dojo. Again, Raef should have only gotten 100 points for this, not 150. This is because Bandai Namco themselves mislabeled these events as being the wrong tier because of some sort of automated system. And so therefore, Raef should be down an additional 100 points because of Bandai Namco mislabeling these dojo events, which would put Raef outside of the Tekken World Tour leaderboards. So, yes, Shadow should have qualified for the Tekken World Tour finals. And this is a mix of two things. If just individually these dojos were reevaluated and changed to be 64-player dojos, that wouldn't take Raef out of the top 20. Also, if Jeddah Dojo was completely stricken from the Tekken World Tour and all of the points revoked, that wouldn't take him out either. Both of these things would have to happen in order for Raef to be taken out of the top 20 of the Tekken World Tour global leaderboards. And should that happen? Yes, absolutely. There's no question about it. Jeddah Dojo clearly violated Tekken World Tour rules in one way or another. Even if those AI-generated names are real players, that means that they were registered outside of StartGG, which is a violation of the Tekken World Tour rules. All participants in a tournament in a dojo, have to submit and register through the tournament page, in this case, StartGG. So no matter what way you spin it, Jeddah Dojo broke the rules, and because of that, with the precedent, Jeddah Dojo should be completely stricken and all of the points revoked from all of the tournaments. And these events are also very clearly mislabeled by Bandai Namco. This was Bandai Namco's fault, and because of that, these should also be changed, and Shadow should be the 20th place qualifier for the Tekken World Tour Finals. He should be going to the Tekken World Tour Finals. But that's, of course, not going to happen. That would require, one, Bandai Namco reviewing these events. And with how close they took place to the Tekken World Tour Finals being on November 4th, this was never going to get investigated by Bandai Namco, and that may well be by design. A lot of these dojos that clearly are in violation and have misconduct are tournaments that happen later in the Tekken World Tour series, and these are just not going to be investigated by Bandai Namco because for whatever reason, when they don't manually review the dojos in the first place, they don't have the manpower or the means or whatever to be able to review, investigate these events. But then on top of that, when it comes to these two events, this would require Bandai Namco to admit fault in mislabeling the dojos, which they are not going to do. And so no matter what way you slice it, even if these events were investigated, Shadow, even though he should rightfully be on the top 20 global leaderboards and going to Tekken World Tour Finals, would never be doing it because it would not only require Bandai Namco to investigate so close to Tekken World Tour Finals, but it would also require them to admit their very clear fault, which they are simply not going to do. It's unfortunate that the situation is the way it is, but I hope that other players, and especially Shadow, advocate for the wrongdoing that has happened here, and Bandai Namco gets pushback for this happening. At the end of the day, no matter what way you slice it, even if it's not Raef's fault, and I don't think it is, Raef should not be qualified for the Tekken World Tour Finals. And it sucks for everyone, right? It sucks for Raef because a large majority of the points that he's gained are, unbeknownst to him, illegitimate. Every single one of these 150 points that he's gotten are illegitimate. The Jeddah dojos account for 2 of them, and then another 2 of them account for Bandai Namco's own screw-ups. The most amount of points he should have gotten from any dojo is 100. And because of that alone, 200 of these points shouldn't be here. And that's not his fault. It's not his fault that Bandai Namco mislabeled the dojo. But at the end of the day, that's how it is. And this is just more proof that there needs to be more investigative work, more scrutiny from Bandai Namco Esports themselves, because this kind of discrepancy is ridiculous for a competitive setting like this and really makes you question the entire competitive integrity of the system at all. And next we go to Allidar. And Allidar has been in the spotlight for the cheating allegations for months and months and months now, and it is really starting to get traction with the wider Tekken community. And a lot of players in Oceania have done a lot of reporting and investigation into this because of how much it affects them. And because they are in the middle of this, and because they have all been affected by this alleged cheating, I'm going to read off what they say and use their words in order to convey what the problem is in Guam. And we're going to start with Necromancer's series of tweets because he has done a lot of the investigative work into Allidar. And I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm going to read what is important to point out about this. Evidence suggests that Allidar may be benefiting from irregular tournament reporting hosted by Guam Esports Federation, which creates unfair advantages on the regional leaderboard. Unfortunately, members of the community have previously raised these concerns with Bandai Namco, but with no clear resolution yet, this approach feels like the best way for the community's voice to be heard. Although I want to be clear, if there's verifiable evidence that disproves any of this, I genuinely welcome correction. Guam Esports Federation on Instagram appears to be hosting numerous tournaments throughout the past 2 years to support Allidar's run for first place on the Oceania leaderboard. In 2024, Allidar placed first on the leaderboard, allowing him to be flown overseas to participate in the Last Chance qualifier. This year, he plans to do the same, yet almost all of his reported tournaments display an unusually high number of disqualifications. Often 15 or more players are recorded as DQs. In the latest dojo GESF Summer Fall Showdown September 2025, there were a total of 20 individual DQs, with 4 of these players DQing in winners and then continuing to play in losers with screenshots attached. An even worse case of this, from the dojo day the 30th of August on his profile, I counted a total of 52 people who DQ'd and at least 1 on winners and losers. I triple checked these numbers, though my human error is still possible. Either way, you can see in the screenshots, they DQ in winners, they go down the losers, and then here, again, DQ in winners, go down the losers, and this is a very common theme that you're going to see from the dojos that are put into question throughout this video and throughout the documentation that I have provided. There are also several instances where players are recorded as losing 0-2 on the winner's side, only to be disqualified immediately in the loser's bracket. Same pattern occurs where there are DQs on the winner's side and then 2-0 on losers. This creates an appearance of artificially inflating the total number of entrants and match results, making the event appear larger and more active than it actually is. Screenshot attached from here, and we will be looking at that. This type of reporting is present throughout all of Allidar's dojos beginning from 2024, making this extremely concerning for the honesty of his dojos and the regional leaderboard. I've only provided screenshots from the dojos mentioned above, as I would spend excessive amounts of time recording this pattern from every tournament on his profile since the start of 2024. Furthermore, Allidar is also the tournament organizer of every dojo listed on his Tekken World Tour profile, while simultaneously being the #1 seeded player in all of them. Now, this is where I'm going to come in. Allidar is not the tournament organizer for every one of his dojo events that is on his Tekken World Tour profile. There are multiple events that Allidar has placed in, multiple dojos that he is not an admin of. That said, he is an admin of a significant number of these events, but he is not an admin for all of them. However, the point here that Necromancer makes is still very valid. This is a major conflict of interest as it allows him to influence tournament logistics, player placements, as well as reporting outcomes, which is 100% accurate. Having such control over both administration and participation raises concerns about the transparency, fairness, and overall credibility of his dojos. These repeated patterns suggest that many of these tournaments may not reflect genuine participation or fair competition. When over a half or a third of entrants are disqualified, with some even appearing in both winners and losers brackets, it raises serious doubts about the validity of the reported results and the legitimacy of the points awarded. Despite this, Bandai Namco still counts these DQs as full point brackets on the Tekken World Tour leaderboard, which severely inflates the point distribution system. And moving on from this, there's more things I said, and I can't scroll down because there are Discord screenshots, and there have been reports of videos being taken down for showing these Discord screenshots for breaching privacy. So I don't want to show anymore, and that's also why I'm blurring one of the images on here as well, because I don't want to risk anything happening to this video. I'm purely trying to show things that are out in the public, mainly .gg pages, to avoid any potential DMCA takedowns because of the nature of this video. But Necromancer makes the point quite clear in this case. There's a significant amount of DQs in these tournaments that seem to be getting misreported. And if you look at this tournament here, the GESF Summer Fall Showdown, that is linked from Necromancer, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 DQs in winners, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 DQs in losers. You also see some of these DQs in losers, like Heidi HO being listed as 0-2 in winners and then DQing in losers. So it's not even a continuation of players that DQ'd in winners, also disqualifying in losers. It is a mix of partial disqualifications in both the winners and the losers bracket, which is obviously a big problem. And sorry, I miscounted. There's also a couple more that are in losers round 3 and round 4 as well. Now, again, when it comes to an individual tournament like this, there is reason to believe that, you know, the disqualification reporting may be accurate and it's just happenstance that ends up being this way. It is a significant amount of DQs, yes, but at the same time, it could just be that the way that they run the tournament or something that's going on with the tournament causes this kind of thing to happen. And you can see as well, the DQs are all over the place. That's very difficult to properly count them and review, with this being 104 entrants, what the actual size of this tournament is. If you look on Allidar's .gg page, you can see that these are labeled as 64-player dojos. Does this fall below 64 players with the amount of DQs? It's way too much to count, right? But we'll talk more about these brackets and the DQs later. For now, let's go to the next series of tweets, which is Bobby. Now, Bobby is the number 2 player on the Oceania leaderboards. And what Bobby's tweets sort of highlight is not only reiterating some of this evidence, but also to show how, if there is false reporting, there are victims in what's happening with this. This isn't just a silly little esports tournament that, you know, is having a little bit of like cheating here and there, a little bit of oopsie whoopsies. There are people that suffer because of what's happening. And I'm going to read out Bobby's series of tweets because I feel that they are very important to highlight. Now that's the end of the Tekken World Tour regional season, I'm posting with great concern to the legitimacy of the Oceanic Tekken World Tour rankings. Necromancer has already posted with great evidence. The player Allidar is benefiting from inflated dojos and boosted numbers at his dojos. After looking at each dojo that has awarded Allidar points, I found that the events often have semi-DQs and a massive amount of full DQs. However, they have carefully ensured that they never drop below the 64-player and 48-player events, so Allidar is able to get as many points as possible. These 48 and 64-player events are very important for Guam, as those numbers are not easily reached in Australia. In October, the bracket of 110 entrants had a total of 46 disqualifications, leaving the total players at exactly 64 players. The bracket in November had a total of 40 players and 8 DQs, leaving the players at exactly 32. September is one of the most drastic cases, as this bracket has 70 entrants with 20 partial DQs and 8 full DQs. Of these partial DQs, many of the players lose 0-2 in winners or losers as one of their games, one of these players being Kwstakis, the president of the Guam Esports Federation, who runs many of these dojos. Another case of a 64-man event is August Dojo with 104 attendees and a total of 52 partial DQs and 18 full DQs, meaning half of these players at this event were DQ'd. That is the event that Necromancer showed here with 104 players, so Bobby has done the work for us. Thank you, Bobby. Very frequently after a player is disqualified, the person who won by disqualification will win or lose 2-0, also questioning the validity of that player's attendance being legitimate. I post this as it is my dream to attend the Tekken World Tour finals and to represent the scene that I love. I have worked unbelievably hard this year to travel interstate 8 times to go to dojos around Australia in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, as my own city of Adelaide cannot even reach a 16-plus man dojo. I've caught a total of 16 flights and spent upwards of $6,000. Let me reiterate this, an upwards of $6,000 to travel and compete for this regional spot. The scene, Australian scene, has rallied together to put together legitimate dojos in order to stand a chance versus the Guam community, as we weren't able to travel to Guam to compete in the dojos. Here's an example of what it would look like to just get to one Guam dojo. And you can see that, yes, prices can be as low as 640 Australian, but this round trip that is 2,500 Australian is 54 hours long. These other ones as well that are more expensive are 22, 23 hours long. And the reason for this is because you aren't going to have direct connecting flights to Guam because, well, no one flies to Guam. Guam is a very remote island in the middle of the ocean. So in order to be able to travel to Guam, not only do you have to incur this extreme expense, but it's also a very, very long flight because you have to make a bunch of connecting flights to eventually get you to Guam. And then that same problem is going to be coming back as well. So when you're flying this much and spending this much money and this much time to go to one dojo for one day in Guam, it is simply not worth it, and it's inattainable. And this really highlights one of the problems with the dojo scene in general is how regions are divided. The regional system does not work. And this is one extreme example of many different examples of how this regional system doesn't work. The dojo system is supposed to highlight the best player in one of the 15 regions and send them to represent their region at the Tekken World Tour finals. But very frequently, players within their region cannot go to other regions to participate in those regions' dojos or play with those other players within their own region because of financial gatekeeping. This is because of how broad the regions are. They are simply not set up in a logical way to allow players to be able to travel and compete with each other. And that also means if you have an isolated poverty region, like Guam, for instance, that they are more easily able to manipulate their own dojos and boost one individual player because it's impossible for other players in the region to be able to go to that dojo and compete with those players or play in these, quote, rigged dojos. I can tell you from my own personal experience living in the America 1 region, America 1 encompasses the entirety of the United States and Canada, including Alaska and Hawaii. This means that if someone lives in Hawaii, it's impossible for them to be able to play in the Tekken World Tour. Even if you have the single best play, if you have an AI bot that lives in Hawaii, they will never be able to qualify for the Tekken World Tour finals because of how financially unsustainable it is. That is a ridiculous flaw with the entire Tekken World Tour system. If you, again, I want to reiterate, if you have someone who lives in Hawaii and they are an AI bot that will always 2-0 every single person they play against, they are tasked, they will not qualify for the Tekken World Tour finals. And it's simply because of the financial cost of being able to attend events within their own region. At the same time, if you flip this on its head, if you have Hawaii, who's constantly hosting 96-player dojos, the only person that can qualify for the Tekken World Tour finals is someone in Hawaii because no one from the United States or Canada is going to be able to go to those events. No one. It would be impossible. And that's sort of what's happening here with Guam. And I can tell you from my own anecdotal experience as someone who lives in Michigan in the United States, it is impossible for me to be able to compete in the Tekken World Tour regional system, not because of my own individual skill, but simply because of the financial cost of it. It would be cheaper for me to try competing in the global leaderboard, going to EVOs and trying to win EVO than it would be to try to participate in the regional dojo system. And I think this from Bobby really illustrates and highlights the core problem and why cheating is so prolific, is so effective, is because of how the regional system is set up. And then we move to Yagami. And Yagami here has posted more evidence of what has been talked about. And what Yagami says here is Guam has been intentionally marking players as partial DQs to inflate their dojos, allowing Allidar to gain more points. The July Guam dojo was marked as a 48 plus dojo. However, if all DQs were properly counted, it would only be a 32 plus dojo. The August Guam dojo was marked as a 64 player dojo. However, once again, the partial DQs, it would be a 48. But then the real damning piece of evidence that Yagami provides here is this player, Uzi Woozy. There's clear evidence that these partial DQs were done with ill intent to boost numbers. Here, a player from New Zealand was marked as a partial DQ, despite being physically impossible for him to attend the tournament because he was playing ranked on June 8th when this tournament took place the following day. And like we showed with Bobby, a flight from New Zealand to Guam takes around 22 hours. Yet Uzi Woozy was marked as going 0-2, and then later what Yagami doesn't show is he was then marked as a disqualification. Here, you can see the bracket for this tournament. You can see here at the top, Uzi Woozy going 0-2, and then if we go down, Uzi Woozy was then later marked as a DQ, which is that same problem that we see in the other brackets that are in Guam. You also see how there are 2 DQs here in winners, and then we go down to losers, and there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 2 full DQs, 4 partial DQs. And in this case, if you count both of them simultaneously, it would bring the entrance to 34. But regardless of that, there is proof that this player was not at this tournament at all. And more proof to sort of allude to the fact that these DQs weren't reported correctly is you look at the amount of 0-2s. And again, this is going to be a key piece of evidence in most of these events, but you look at the amount of 0-2s here between winners round 1 and 2, there is a single game that goes 1 and 2. When you get to winners round 3, there's only 1 more. And that is highly unusual. And when you look in losers, again, you have 1 single game in losers round 2 that goes 1 and 2, and then you have 3 in round 3 that go 1 and 2. It's very unusual behavior for this to happen. This either means that seeding is inaccurate, meaning that this is just a very uncompetitive environment, or there are a lot of players here that should have been listed as DQs that weren't. And so what's a possible explanation for this? Because unlike with Raef's tournaments, these do seem to be real players. How are you having such a large amount of DQs at your tournaments consistently like what's happening in Guam? And I believe I have an answer. And that falls to this funny little button right here, Smash Ultimate Singles. Because you see, the Guam Esports Federation, the Guam FGC, doesn't just have Tekken as a game that they play, they also very consistently have Smash. And if you look at the Smash bracket, you can see that there are quite a few players who are playing in Smash. And some of these players in the Smash bracket are also in the Tekken bracket. I want you to look at Zoro, for instance, up here. If we look at the Tekken bracket, Zoro is listed here as going 2-0, and then 0-2, and then we go down the losers, and he's listed as going 0-2. That same sort of pattern we see with, like, Uzi Woozy, for example. And so if we look at Zoro's profile, something you're going to notice that's very interesting is that this person is a Smash player. If you look at his details, he says he's a Smash Ultimate player for Guam. And if you look at his profile, you'll notice that he plays Smash. But he also plays Tekken 8. And almost every single time he plays in Tekken 8, he goes 0-2. You look at this one Recon 2025, he is listed as going 0-2. If we look here, Tekken 8, Tekken World Tour dojo, he goes 0-2, and then he's listed as going 1-2 in his next game. He has a win here, which was 2-0, and this player also went 0-2 later. And this player that he went 2-0 against, Heidi, was then in losers listed as a DQ. Which means that Zoro didn't even actually win this game. This player allegedly was just not present at the tournament, and they marked them as a partial DQ. So that 2-0 and the scores may not even be real. Here's another one. From July 25th, the Guam Esports Federation Summer Fall Showdown that had all of those DQs. Again, he's listed as going 0-2. He's listed as going 0-2 in pretty much every single one of these tournaments. Here's another one from June 6th, 0-2, 0-2, 2-0. And if you look at this player's profile, again, win through DQ and then 0-2. And another interesting thing about this as well is this is going back all the way to last year with Season 1 of the Tekken World Tour, and again, 0-2, 0-2. But the real damning piece of evidence is the Summer Fall Series in September, where he is listed as a DQ. And so this is evidence that alludes to the fact that all of these other games with Zoro, where he's listed as 0-2, were actually disqualifications, and he's never participated in Tekken despite signing up for it. And another interesting thing as well is that the first time in Zoro's entire .gg profile where he is listed as playing Tekken 8, May 4th, 2024, which is the first Tekken World Tour Dojo event in Guam, he is listed as going 0-2 in this tournament as well. And if you look through the rest of Zoro's .gg page, you'll notice that there is not a single instance beforehand where he plays in Tekken. He plays Smash, he plays Street Fighter 6, but he does not play Tekken 7 at all. And this isn't just this one player as well. There's another one, K3D here, who is a Smash player. He plays in Smash, but he also has a couple of times where he has played Tekken, and he is also going 0-2 in these as well. And another thing as well, if you go to May 4th, 2024, you're going to notice this is the first Tekken 8 tournament he's played in, and he DQ'd. And if you look before that, he never played in Tekken. This is the first time, and he went 0-2, 2-0, and then DQ'd, which again indicates that his placements in Tekken, he was never actually playing the game. And so this is where Guam, I suspect, is allegedly getting these players to inflate their dojo numbers in order to get a higher place on the dojo tier, and why there are so many players that are DQing, because they are all Smash players that aren't actually playing Tekken. They are only there, they are only registered to inflate the dojo numbers. Another interesting thing about K3D as well, if you look at the tournament where Uzi Woozy was labeled as 2-0 when he should have DQ'd, K3D is listed as an admin for the tournament. And so that might give some motive as to why this is happening. Now, here's why I suspect you have Smash players in droves signing up for Tekken 8 when they have no intention of playing. The simple reason is that signing up for the bracket is free. It's free. There's no charge. And so what I assume the tournament organizers are doing is they are telling the Smash players to just sign up for Tekken. Because if you are in the Smash bracket and you go 0-2 or whatever, and you're at this thing, it sucks to just go home early after going 0-2. So if you sign up for the Tekken 8 bracket, you go 0-2 in Smash, hey, you still have something you can do afterwards. You still have a game that you can play if you go 0-2. And the other reason might be is just, if you signed up for the bracket and you just want to play, you can try it out. You can see if it's a game you'll like. You can play the game for free if you want to. So there's no harm in signing up for it. You lose nothing if you're a Smash player if you sign up in Tekken. If you want to play it, then cool. You're already in a bracket. You don't have to do anything. You can just get in there and go. If you don't want to play it and you're like Zoro here, who just gets first in like every single Smash event that they go to, then, you just play in Smash and you don't bother with Tekken because the TOs will handle all of it for you. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. Regardless of the reason, this seems to be how Guam is able to inflate their dojo numbers the way that they do. They are real people that are signing up for the tournament, but they have no real intention of playing Tekken. They probably don't even know how the Tekken World Tour works or what's going on. The TOs are probably just asking them to do it, and they have no idea what's happening. So while all of this information is, of course, alleged, like we don't know exactly what's happening, the Oceania players have been very outspoken about this for a long time. And if this is going on, it's been going on since the beginning of the Tekken World Tour dojo. They have had a plan to do this before the Tekken World Tour even started in Season 1. And because of the harm that has been caused to players in the Oceania region, if this is the case, if this has happened, there needs to be a statement from Bandai Namco. Of all of the things that are going to be talked about throughout this video and throughout the documentation, this is the single most important thing for Bandai Namco to address, because there's so many eyes on it, there's so much attention, and there's been evidence that's been presented. Bandai Namco should make a statement to the players. It's important to preserve the competitive integrity of the Tekken World Tour, and part of preserving that competitive integrity is being transparent with what you're doing to enforce the rules of the tour. Maybe Bandai Namco investigates this and finds no wrongdoing. That is possible, but if they do that, they need to tell players about this, because there is so much that's been presented, and players are so disgruntled by what's happening that if they don't, then regardless of what's happening in actuality, it calls into question the entirety of the Tekken World Tour as a whole. The next region we're going to be shifting our focus to is the Europe 2 region. And the number one player in the Europe 2 region is Kwstakis. Apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. And this player, the main tournaments that they've played in are Lock Dojo. And Lock Dojo has a similar problem as Guam, where they have DQs that go down to exactly 64 players, which indicates misreporting DQs and dojo point inflation. So if we look at a couple of these just as an example, we have this one, Lock Dojo number 25 with 71 entrants. And if we look at the brackets, the DQs, we can see 1, 2, 3 DQs in this one, a whole bunch in losers. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which gives us 5 partial DQs. And then we have an additional 2 here. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is another 5 partial DQs. So the total amount of DQs that we have is 6 for this 71 person event, which brings the total amount of participants down to 65. But then obviously, if we count the partial DQs, I don't need to do the math for you. This would bring this well below the 64 player threshold. And another thing to point out as well is to look at the 0-2s in winners round 1 and round 2. There is a single game between winners round 1, 2, and 3 that go 1 and 2. And then if you look in losers, it's a similar story, except this goes with 0 games that go 1 and 2 up until losers round 5, which is another indicator that a lot of these players that are playing aren't actually here and should have been listed as DQs. When we look at Lock Dojo number 24, again, it's a similar story. It has 74 entrants in the bracket, and we have 1, 2, 3 DQs up in winners, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DQs in losers. So there's 2 partial DQs. And then in this pool, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DQs in winners and 5 DQs in losers. So there is a total of 8 DQs with 2 partial DQs. And if you combine those together, that's 10 total DQs, which would bring the number down to exactly 64. If we look at Lock Dojo number 23, again, it's the same thing. We have 70 entrants for this tournament, and we have 1, 2, 3 DQs up in winners and a whole bunch in losers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in losers. So it's 5 partial DQs. And then we have another 3 full DQs and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 5 partial DQs. So 6 full, 10 partial, which is ridiculous. And Again, that brings the number down to 65 disqualifications. Oh, no, sorry, this was 4 DQs. Sorry, so it was 7 full DQs in total, which brings this down to exactly 64 players. And with the partial DQs, obviously it would go below the 64 player status. And so here's Lock Dojo number 22 as well. This had 82 entrants, and you can see with the DQs, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we have 7 also in losers. And then here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here as well, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. 8, sorry, I miscounted. There's 8 here, and then 8 here. So that makes for a total of 15 disqualifications, which brings the number of entrants for this tournament down to 67. And because these are all full DQs as well, it really makes you wonder why the DQs in these dojos are so... There are so many partials and not full DQs as well, when it would bring them down the 64 player number. And you can also see with this tournament as well, in comparison to the other ones, look how many games go 1 and 2. You have one here, 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 and losers, you have one here. You have one here, have here, here. So this is a lot more of like a reasonable dojo, but this is also very early on in the Tekken World Tour season, and as we get further along, the more and more egregious that they get. The problem with Lock Dojo is that when it happens once, it could be a coincidence, but when it happens this many times over the course of multiple tournaments, over the course of multiple months, it becomes a pattern. And that pattern is something that we see from other dojos, other tournaments that are engaging in not reporting DQs, that kind of behavior. Now, the interesting thing about Lock Dojo is that Lock Dojo is an acronym. LOK. And if you go to the homepage for Lock Dojo, these tournaments are hosted by Legacy of Kaiser. And so, in my mind, this feels like a gross betrayal of trust. Because this person is known in the fighting game community. He obviously puts together these events that have a bunch of other tournaments in them. And so, his tournaments engaging in this behavior feels gross. And this isn't to say that Legacy of Kaiser is the mastermind. He's the one doing this. This is a multi-game tournament. He is the sole admin of the tournament. He's not going to be overseeing everything. They're going to be bracket organizers for that, I'm sure, who are reporting the DQs. I'm not saying that he is the person that is doing this. But what I am saying is that as the admin and organizer of an event, of a tournament, you are the one that is responsible for ensuring fair play and the competitive nature of your tournament. If there are things like this that are going on that needs to be investigated by the person that makes and organizes the tournament, and by not doing that, they are part of the being complicit in not just the tournament itself's competitive integrity, but also the competitive integrity of the Tekken World Tour as a whole. So even though he might not be the one that is causing this to happen with the bracket, there is still that very clear pattern and that problem of not reporting DQs at his tournament. And that's something that he, as the organizer, has the responsibility to look into. In my personal opinion, looking at these dojos, I do not think that he has done that. And with him being such a prominent figure, I think that just makes the situation even worse. But it's not just Lock Dojo that Kwstakis has participated in. There is also this dojo, BattleNet SKG Dojo number 1, a 32-player dojo. And if you look at the brackets, this also taking place in Greece. It has 45 entrants, and I actually zoom out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 disqualifications, bringing the number down to 34. Now, one of these DQs was partial. So 10 full DQs, 1 partial DQ. So if you exclude the partial DQ, it brings it down to 35 players instead. But the point still stands. Because of the other problems with these tournaments, and because Legacy of Kaiser participating in this tournament, this dojo also comes into question just as a product of circumstance. And then we also have the last one, Yomi X Retro Sefer Volume 7. This tournament actually took place in Poland, not in Greece. And this was labeled as a 64-player event, and it has 65 entrants. And notably, this tournament has 0 DQs. It has 1 partial DQ, but again, that's not a full DQ. And then they go 0-2 in losers. So this really brings into question the entirety of the Europe 2 region as a whole. This isn't just about like one player playing at one tournament series. We see this pattern with a lot of tournaments in this region, whether it's in Greece or in Poland. And I can tell you that I had someone talk to me who is in Greece and has gone to Lock Dojo, that the tournament reporting and the DQ reporting is accurate, according to this player. But the problem is that they suspect that tournaments in Poland are rigging the brackets to inflate their numbers. And when you look at this tournament and you look at being 65 entrants, 0 DQs, and you like look at not that bracket, this bracket with the 0-2s, I mean, mostly it does look fairly normal. I mean, you have like A1-2 here. I mean, the rest of this is like whatever. But you look here and you see like you have 3 1-2s here. You have a 1-2 here. You have a 1-2 here. Like this looks fairly normal. But having the 1 partial DQ to bring it down to 64 and then nothing else reported, when you have like this bracket, for example, or even this one with 1-1-2, is like, it's really difficult to look at this, especially when you look at the circumstances around everything else and not call it at least a little bit into question. But then the other problem from this is, even regardless of that, there might be a case where you have bracket organizers that are organizing the Tekken 8 bracket, assuming that there is foul play, who are doing this at Lock Dojo because they suspect that there's cheating in Poland. And we just looked at the Oceania region, and we looked at Oceania as being a place that believes that if there is cheating, then we have to report to Bandai Namco, do something about, do it the legitimate way. But if Bandai Namco isn't going to do anything, then the only way for your community to be able to compete within the region in the Tekken World Tour leaderboard, if someone else is cheating, is to cheat yourself. The only 2 ways you have to be able to actually compete in Tekken World Tour in your region, if somewhere else is cheating that is not financially available to you, and going from Greece to Poland is obviously a huge financial trek. It's just not going to be able to happen. I mean, you have to go all the way through the Baltics region in order to be able to get there, because Greece is at the bottom part of Europe. You have to go all the way to Poland. It's just not going to realistically be able to happen. So the only 2 options you have is to document, report to Bandai Namco, and hope that they do something before the Tekken World Tour finals, which obviously they don't have a track record of doing. Or you can cheat yourself and inflate the dojo numbers yourself. Because if you don't do that, you don't have a chance in hell of being able to compete with the other part of the region that's consistently cheating these 64-player dojos when they should be, say, 32, like yours should be. And then the number 1 player there is going to move on to Tekken World Tour finals when you know they shouldn't rightfully be doing that. So your only option for your community and your locals to be able to compete is to cheat yourself, because Bandai Namco doesn't do anything about cheating. They don't investigate anything. And that could be a reason why this is happening. Now, is it justification? I'm not trying to justify cheating in the Tekken World Tour, but it is a reason that certainly makes sense. When you have no other recourse and you can't trust Bandai Namco to do their job and enforce the rules, then you kind of have to take the rules into your own hands. And so if players in Greece suspect Poland of cheating, and we assume that Lock Dojo is cheating the numbers, if that's the reason for it, not only does it make sense and give motivation for it, but in my opinion, while it is wrong, it's a lot less egregious than maliciously cheating in order to game the system. Instead, you're cheating to be able to compete within a system that not only condones cheating, but encourages it because there's been no enforcement. Again, and I want to reiterate, I'm not condoning any region cheating or any dojos cheating or anything like that. And again, everything in this is alleged. However, this is another side of the coin that I want to point out to show that because of how dojos are handled and how the Tekken World Tour system is, not necessarily everything is going to be done in a malicious way. There are going to be other reasons for it. And even though, yes, it's wrong, it's still important to understand that there might be that context behind it, and there might be more of a deeper reason for this alleged cheating going on in the various regions than it might look on the surface. So the next region we're going to be looking at is the MEA3 region. And this might be a little bit confusing because Bandai Namco has just taken action on the MEA3 region and the #1 player in the region because of misconduct. That is not what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about the current #1 player after that, yOReDz. And yes, I do believe that there is still misconduct in the region, even after Bandai Namco has taken action. So yOReDz has a couple of events here that are listed as 96-player dojos that he's won. He's gained a lot of points from these events, and they are all organized by CGC Kuwait. And all of these dojos follow a very similar pattern that really brings all of these events that yOReDz has gained points for into question. With this event, for example, there are 97 total entrants, and as you would guess, 0 disqualifications. 0. Not a single one in a 97-person event, but also look at the amount of 0-2s in this. I counted the amount of games that went 1 and 2, and up until losers round 6, 4% of games went 1 and 2. In fact, I can count them for you. So here in losers, up until losers round 6, there's a total of 73 games that were played. And there is a total of, and I'm looking for them right now, and it's hard to even find them, 1, 2 games that went 1 and 2 up until losers round 6. 2 of 73, and they both took place in losers round 2. There were 2 games that went 1 and 2 of 73. And then even into losers round 4, there's only 1 game in here that went 1 and 2. Losers round 7, there's 1 game, and then it starts to get a little bit better later on, but 2. In winners, it's a similar story. Up until top 16 in winners, there were 90 games that were played, and a total of 1, 2, and if I can even find the other 2, that would be great. 3, 4. Found it. They were right next to each other. 4 games went 1 and 2 of 94. I don't think I need to explain this any further, but this continues. This isn't the only dojo event that yOReDz attended that has this same pattern, this same problem. So here's another one, Final Kuwait Dojo. Now, this wasn't enough points for yOReDz to be able to actually gain points from it. I mean, technically it is because he has other dojos at 100 points. But regardless, it's hosted by the same organizers as this one. Even though for some reason it doesn't say on here, CGC, it is the same tournament series. And this had 65 players. So if you look at the bracket here, interestingly enough with this one, there were actually 1, 2 full DQs, which should have put this at a 48 plus dojo because it had 63 entrants. It was still labeled as a 64 for some reason. So good on Bandai Namco for that or something. But there's also still a significant amount of 0-2s. I mean, you can look at this. Winners round 2, not a single game went 1 and 2. In winners round 3, exactly 1 game went 1 and 2. In fact, I'm just going to read this from my own documentation real quick. By winners round 4, with 55 games played, only 4 of them went 1 and 2. The loser side is a bit more normal, with 8 of the 55 games going 1 and 2, but still, it shows that consistent pattern that's going on. Here's another one as well, 3rd Dojo Elite, 96 entrants, and again, there's 0 DQs and a swath of 0-2s. At this point, you get the picture. And because of this consistent pattern of not only not having DQs, but also the 0-2s, clearly indicating, with basically no cover-up, that there are a bunch of DQs and they're just not reporting it, that calls the entire tournament series into question. And every single one of the events that yOReDz attended and got points for was from CGC, Kuwait. Every one of them. And so that means that there is an argument that yOReDz should have exactly 0 points in the MEA3 region. The fact that Bandai Namco has already done an investigation, deemed wrongdoing, removed points, and there's still problems with this region shows just how deep-rooted this entire problem is. It continues to show that even if Bandai Namco tries enforcing the rules and what is going on, there's still so many issues with how the system works, and it's so easy to cheat, manipulate brackets, allegedly, that you can't really fix the system as it is. The entire system needs to be completely upended and changed, because nothing short of a complete redoing of the dojo system is going to fix this, and it's only going to get worse in the future as more and more people know about the cheating. Now let's move on to a region that has blatantly violated the Tekken World Tour rules. A lot of this video has been saying allegedly they've cheated, Bandai Namco should do an investigation, and part of that is because I think that Bandai Namco is the one who should be investigating this stuff, and they should have the final say on this, and we should present the information if we see it, but also to avoid liability. But this is a case where undoubtedly, without a shadow of a doubt, there has been a violation of the Tekken World Tour rules, and the region should be punished, and the #1 player should not be going to the finals, and that is the case in the Asia 2 region with this player, RTM. And the reason for this is very different from the other reasons. The reason for why I'm saying that there has been a violation of the rules is not because of bracket manipulation or DQs, it's for another reason entirely. If we look at this event, I'm sorry, I don't speak the language. Tekken Brawl Showdown. This is not a point that RTM received points for. He didn't place well enough. But it is one of the best examples of what's going on in Indonesia to show you the problem with the Asia 2 region. This is an event that had 64 players and 0 DQs. So this is where normally I'd go into the whole thing of like this bracket is manipulating the numbers. Also look and see how many 0-2s there. I mean, this had 1 in the entire pool. This had 1, 2, 3, 4. So a little bit more normal. But that's not the point. It doesn't even matter. This event had 64 players because there was a cap of 64 players for the tournament. So, okay, that makes sense why it's exactly 64. And that might even make sense why there's 0 DQs, maybe. But the problem is when we go down here, this little mark means that this player does not have a Start GG account when they were signed up for the tournament. And if we look at how many players there are, there's a significant number of them in this tournament that do not have Start GG accounts. In fact, of the 64 players that attended this, I counted the 24 that are listed here as not having Start GG accounts. About a third. And this is obviously ripe for abuse. If you're just throwing in .gg accounts like this, you're just throwing in like this player, yeah, they exist in the .gg, then that is, I don't need to explain how easy that is to abuse if there's no like verification of this whatsoever. This means that if this event had, say, 40 players that actually signed up, then they can just throw in fake accounts to meet the 64 player cap. And this is actually one of the least egregious examples of this happening. If we go to Japan Hype, which is an event that had 92 players in it. Again, we're not even going to look at the bracket. Just look at the attendees. And you're going to see the same thing where a significant number, and you can see a more frequent number of players at this event, look at all of this, do not have .gg accounts. On some pages, the amount of players that don't have .gg accounts are outweighing, in fact, it might be every page, are outweighing the amount of players that do. So of this event that had 92 players, again, I counted 57 do not have .gg accounts. 57! 60% of them don't have .gg accounts. An absurd number. This one, Gameverse Rise of the Galaxy, was even worse. This was 113 players. 113. And again, look at all these. This was a 96-player dojo. This was listed as a 96-player dojo. Look at all of these players that do not have .gg accounts. The total number here was 63, which was well over half for a 96-person event. Now, something that's also a little bit strange about this to point out, and I'm only going to open a couple of brackets here, is that there are a significant amount of DQs in this tournament, but most of the DQs, and this is just a random one I clicked on, I didn't plan this out, are from these accounts that do not have .gg accounts. And so one of the explanations for this might be someone arrives on the day of the tournament and signs up, sure, but if they're DQing like this, that's not what's happening. Look, that's 3 in a row, 4, 5, well, nope, this person did have an account. So 4 of these DQs were from players that didn't have accounts. So that's not what's happening either. Here's the most egregious example of this. This is J-Town Showdown Open Tournament. This was the first dojo that was attended, and this had 77 attendees, 76 players in the bracket. Look at all of that. Look at it. In this tournament, a total of 60 players did not have .gg accounts. 60. That is more than 75%. And so why is this happening? Why is this happening? The answer is because, for whatever reason, on the .gg page, Tekken 8 registration, click on this, link, register for Tekken 8 Japan Hype, and it leads to a bit.ly link, which leads to a Google form. These tournaments in Indonesia are using Google Forms to register competitors for their tournaments. And that is what all of these players without .gg accounts are. Here it is for this one as well. If we go back to the homepage, register here, click on this link, it leads to a bit.ly link, which also leads to a Google form to sign up for the tournament. Now, for some reason, this one, J-Down Showdown, doesn't have any. In fact, they haven't changed any of the information on the .gg. It's a default .gg page. So I don't know how players are supposed to be able to sign up for this or even like know what to. But maybe they edited the page later to get rid of the registration page. I don't know. But regardless, that's why this is happening. And this is in clear violation of the Tekken World Tour rules. You are not allowed to do this. Even regardless of all of the very obvious reasons why this is a problem and why this makes it so much easier to manipulate brackets, you could have like this, a 17-person tournament where you just throw in 60 fake players and then you call it good. But regardless of that, the official Tekken World Tour rules say in the dojo section, dojo events are independently operated open offline tournament events that have opted in to be recognized as part of the tournament via an application process on the ranking website as defined below or other website designated by Bandai Namco Esports. Dojo events are required to use the ranking website or other websites designated by Bandai Namco Entertainment or Esports or either or to A, list a dojo event, B, take registration, and C, set up and record the bracket. So I highly doubt that all of these separate events organized by separate people have all gotten approval from Bandai Namco Esports to use Google Forms to register competitors. I don't believe that's happened. It's the only way that the non-violation of the rules. So if we assume that's the case, these tournaments in Indonesia have not used the ranking website StartGG to take registration. And you can make an argument that, well, that they did use it to take registration, but they also used something else. No. That's not how it works. They are using a website outside of StartGG to register competitors, and that is explicitly not allowed per Tekken World Tour rules. And again, it should be, because if this became something that was standard and anyone could do, instead of making up fake AI-generated names on StartGG, instead what you'd be doing is you just be putting like a Google form here so that you had some way to be able to generate reasonable doubt, and then just throw in a bunch of fake accounts onto the page and then bump up the number of the dojo tier. Be as simple as that, and anyone could do it. And this, again, is more proof that Bandai Namco isn't looking at this, because when you look at, like, this one, for example, as soon as you see one of these, that should immediately disqualify it from being eligible, because that means this participant did not sign up through StartGG. But yet, it was listed as a 48-person event, and all of the points have been awarded, and this one wasn't because of, again, broadcast. So, to be clear, I don't think that this is malicious from RTM or Asia 2. I mean, these events have been hosted by multiple different organizers across the entire season for the Tekken World Tour regional leaderboard. I don't believe that this was done with any sort of malice, and I don't believe that this was done to boost the numbers. I genuinely do believe that this is just something they do in Indonesia. I don't know why, but that's what I assume. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here. I don't think that they're doing anything malicious, because, like, if they were with Japan, why is this at 92 instead of 96 attendees? You know what I mean? Why would they just not put in 4 more attendees, make them non-StartGG accounts, and be like, well, we have the registration page here, so it's all legit? I just don't see that being the case. So I don't think that anyone here is, like, at fault. I don't think that RTM is cheating. I don't think any of the tournament organizers are cheating. I don't think they're rigging the bracket. I don't think that, like, there's any malice in what's happening. But at the same time, it's in violation of the Tekken World Tour rules. That's how it is. That's the truth. And the other problem as well is, if you don't enforce this, it sets a precedent. And this is something that, even if this region isn't abusing it, other regions can very easily abuse it. And if people start doing this, making StartGG players that don't have accounts, then it's going to be so much easier to inflate the bracket than just listing false DQs or whatever. So this is a real problem. This is something that should not be tolerated or condoned. Again, Indonesia, the entire region, might have a reason for doing this. There might be a legitimate reason for doing this. It might just be some sort of cultural thing that they do, but it is not within the rules. And setting this as a precedent that is okay is going to cause so many problems that it simply cannot be allowed. And now let's move on from that and go to a region that you may not have been expecting to come up in this video or in the documentation. And it is a region that more of you who are watching this are in, and these tournaments you may have even gone to, and that's Europe 1. And the number 1 player in Europe 1 is Hexmark. And I just want to, again, reiterate, I don't think that Hexmark is cheating. I don't think he's knowingly cheating. I don't believe that to be the case. However, Hexmark's tournaments that has gone to, the Galaxy Explosion esports tournaments do have a lot of things that come into question when it comes to DQ reporting. Let's look at Galaxy Explosion number 30. When we go to the Tekken bracket, there are 64 entrants. And as you are going to rightfully guess, there are 0 DQs and a significant amount of games that go to 0. In this bracket, for example, Pool 1, not a single game in winners goes 1-0. Not one. And this, again, is an indicator that even though we see in like this bracket a more normal amount of games that go 1 and 2, even though we're not really seeing that on losers, even if there is one DQ that was not reported correctly because this is a 64-person bracket, that has an effect on the dojo tier. And so every single one of these instances should be looked at through a microscopic lens, and looking at this, it does look suspicious. However, when this is just obviously one tournament, you know, it could be coincidence. These kind of things happen. So now we're going to go on to number 28, and we're going to see a similar thing. It has 97 entrants, and as I'm sure you can already guess, without me having to say anything, there were 0 DQs. And also, again, a significant amount of games that went 0-2. I mean, look in losers here. We have 1 in losers round 2, none in round 1, round 3, round 4. In winners side as well, we have none in round 1. We have 1 in round 2. And we have 1 in winners quarter. It's very unusual. Here in Pool 1B, we have 0 games that go 1 and 2 up until winners quarters. In winners and in losers, we have 2 that happen in round 3. This is just very unusual behavior. But then we look at like Pool A1, and we have 1 between winners round 1 and 2, and it's just, again, it brings a point of suspicion. Then we go to number 26, and number 26 has 103 entrants. And if we look, this is going to actually have DQs. You can see it has 4 DQs here. It has 2 DQs here. It has none in this. It has none in this. So it has a total of 6, which brings the entrants down to 97. And also later in the bracket, again, a significant amount of games that go 0-2. In fact, throughout all of these brackets between winners and losers round 1 and 2, there are only 4 games that go 1 and 2. Only 4. Of the 96 that were played. So it's about 4%, which is, again, something that we see from other events that are like this, where they aren't reporting the DQs properly. Somewhere below 10% is the point where you start scratching your head and you start thinking, this doesn't seem right. So the fact that this has happened across 3 different tournaments establishes that there is a pattern of this happening. But is there any more definitive proof, or is it just circumstance? And there is. So if we go to this one, the bi-monthly number 28, again, 97 players and 0 DQs. This tournament hosts other games. And in these other games, 2XKO had 64 players and a lot of DQs. I mean, just in winners, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 DQs. And that's one pool. In the other pool, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it had somewhere around 17 disqualifications in a 64-player bracket. Even Garo, Fatal Fury, 14 players and had 3 DQs. One of them, and 3 full DQs, 1 partial DQ. Street Fighter 6, same thing. This had 49 entrants, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 DQs. So what's going on here? Because Tekken 8 had 97, which is significantly more than even the second highest 2XKO, which had 64. And it's the only game that didn't have DQs. And it's not just isolated to this one event. If we go to number 30 as well, and we look at the other games, 2XKO had 37 entrants, and we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 DQs on winners, and then we have an amount of DQs on losers. It's not important exactly how many, it's just to illustrate that there are DQs in these games. Street Fighter had 4 DQs in total. Guilty Gear Strive, which had 13 entrants, still had a DQ. And Grand Blue, which had 15 entrants, also had 2 DQs. So why is Tekken 8 with 64 entrants, who has more than quadruple the amount of participants as Grand Blue, have less DQs than all of the other games? Why is that the case? Someone explain it to me. But then moving on from that, If we go to number 26, which we talked about, Guilty Gear Strive, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter here, but you can see, again, there's 5 DQs in here. In Garo, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 DQs in Garo in a 26-person event. Virtual Fighter 5, we have a DQ, and then Grand Blue, we have 1, 2, 3 DQs. And this isn't as relevant, of course, because this event actually did have DQs, but the fact that it's comparable to like Garo, which had 26 entrants, because again, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 DQs. And if we look at Garo again, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it had more DQs than Tekken did. And it had, again, a quarter of the entrants. So that is more proof that they aren't reporting the DQs properly. The fact that in every single one of these tournaments, okay, I shouldn't say everyone, because there are, to give it credit, number 31 did have normal participation, it had normal numbers, it had normal DQs. However, and I'll show this just to show this, but we had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 DQs in this tournament. 13, 14, 15. Sorry, I skipped it. Let me recount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It had 12 DQs, right? So that's more normal. That makes a lot more sense. But when you have multiple tournaments that are showing the same pattern of no DQs, and then there are other games having a significant amount of DQs while all of them having less players in total, that really makes you think that there's something awry with this. There's one other piece of evidence as well, and I'm going to keep bringing this up because of this event being a lot bigger in the space of Tekken and the FGC and more people knowing about it, so I'm trying to present everything that I see and I know. People at this tournament are playing in more than just Tekken. And if we look at some of the profiles of some of the players that have played in multiple tournaments, like this person, Shagaru, for instance, they played in 2XKO, and they are listed as a DQ, but here they go 0-2, 2-0, 0-2 in Tekken. Okay, well, that's just one example. Is there more, Seth? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, there's more. There's this person, Mamad, who played in Tekken and Garo, and in Garo, they DQ'd, but in Tekken, they went 0-2, 2-0, 0-2. Another player, Mizori7, same thing. 2XKO, DQ, Tekken, 0-2, 0-2. But the biggest indicator that there's something awry that's going on is this player, Big Rick. Big Rick played in Street Fighter. Except he didn't, actually. He won his first game through DQ. And then went on to round 2, and then DQ'd in winners and losers. So this isn't just a case of someone like DQing in like the game because they're not there and then playing in Tekken or whatever, which could be an explanation. This player had enough time to report into Street Fighter into round 2 of the bracket and DQ'd, which tells me they were never at the tournament. But if you look, they played with Tekken. They're listed as going 0-2 and 0-2, which is a really big indicator to me that this person was never at the tournament, they were never present, and they were still listed as being here for Tekken, but not for Street Fighter. And that would explain why there are 0 listed disqualifications for these tournaments in Tekken. Now, I'm going to defend Galaxian Explosion here a little bit, and the evidence against them is damning. But the first thing I'm going to say is I don't think that Hexmark is cheating or knowingly cheating or whatever. This is just local, right? This is the event that you go to in France. It has the numbers. It has 96 players. And you have other players, big players that are going here as well. Super Akuma goes here. Jod goes here. In this tournament in particular, you had even more players. You had Fergus that was coming here. Eddie, Tempest, Kasim, like Gosane. So many people go to these tournaments. And I don't think that there's been a collective effort between all of these players to be like, we're going to rig the bracket. I don't think that's happening. What I think is happening is that there is someone that is reporting the brackets that's doing this. And I don't think that the tournament organizers understand how the Tekken World Tour works and the disqualification works, even though they should, when their events are part of it, but I don't think they do. And the reason why is because someone who goes to these events pointed out to me, and if I go to one of these admins' profiles and I look at tournaments organized, if I go to Galaxian Explosion eSpot bi-monthly number 33, this is listed as a dojo event, even though it took place in January. It took place less than 2 weeks before the final, which logically means that, I mean, this isn't going to be a dojo event. Everyone knows this, but it's listed as a dojo anyway. What I think is happening is the tournament organizers don't know that dojos are, or disqualifications are important to actually see in for like the Tekken World Tour dojo system. I think that the admins, the organizers of this tournament, were told by the Tekken players that go here, especially because there are so many high-level players, like you see Super Akuma right here, that their tournament should sign up for the Tekken World Tour dojo system. And they did that at the behest of the Tekken players, but then have just not really looked into the rules or anything about it. And they're just like, we're just going to let everyone do their own thing. And the bracket organizers maybe are going rogue and they're not listing disqualifications properly. And the tournament organizers aren't looking into it because they have no idea what's going on. And that would explain this. And I was told by someone that went to this event that the reason this says dojo is because the tournament organizers specifically thought this would be a dojo event. But if you know the Tekken World Tour rules, if you follow the game at all, you would know there's no way in hell that this would be a dojo event, and dojo events haven't been happening for months. So that's what indicates to me that it's not the players' fault, and it's not even the tournament organizers' fault. It's some rogue players that are manipulating the bracket, and the tournament organizers probably don't even know. Now, that said, yes, it's still their fault because, like the same thing with Lock Dojo, the tournament organizer is still responsible for ensuring the competitive integrity and fair play of the tournament and the Tekken World Tour if you're part of the dojo system. So yes, they are at fault for not understanding the rules of the dojo when they're making their events dojos. But this is another case where I don't think that there is malice from the players, the tournament organizers. I think really the problem lies with a few rogue people in the bracket who are manipulating the bracket to get the numbers bigger, but I don't think that it's specific, that this is known to the players or the organizers or anything like that. Should obviously action be taking place still, though? Yes, absolutely. I mean, like, you just look at what's happening with the brackets. Should Hexmark be the player who is going to the Tekken World Tour finals? You know, I mean, that's another question we have to ask that's very difficult to answer, because if we look at the number 2 player on the leaderboard, hey, guess what? They attend the same tournaments. So it's an answer that I don't have for you when it comes to who should be the rightful player on Europe 1 leaderboard. But what I can tell you is I think that just this has been overlooked by a lot of people, and there's not any sort of malicious thing that's been going on from the tournament organizer or anything, which I think is very important to point out, and it's fair to point it out to this tournament series' organizers. So now let's continue on to the MEA2 region, and this is going to be a really short one. This has to do with Yondaime, and this is not a question of if Yondaime should be number 1 on the leaderboard spot or not. He should be. He should be the number 1 ranked player. He has performed very well in the region, but the problem is that if you look at Yondaime, the number 1 MEA2 player, and you look at these events, I don't even need to explain this to you. I'm just going to click on a couple of them here. This is a 132 entrant event, and it has 0 DQs. None. It has none. And look at the amount of 0-2s. Like, look at this. This is egregious. This is ridiculous. It's just, if you've seen anything else in this video, you'll look at this and you'll be like, yeah, that is not right. Same thing here, 89-person event. Oh my God. And it has 1 partial and no other DQs, right? Same thing. Here, 131-person event. And if we go here, we click on all of these profiles, and we have 1, 2, 3 DQs, 5 DQs, with that one of those being partial in a 131 player event. Like, this just doesn't happen. You know, this is a very clear-cut case. Here's another one, round 6, 109 entrants, of not reporting DQs properly. I mean, you look at the amount of 0-2s, maybe not in this bracket. You look at the lack of DQs, it just doesn't line up. And I have no doubt in my mind that Yondaime these events, even after you count DQs, would be 96 player events. And I have no doubt that Yondaime would be the #1 player on the leaderboard regardless. But you still have to enforce the rules of the tournament to ensure the competitive integrity and the sanctity of the competitive nature of the event. You can't just pick and choose like, yeah, well, they're probably fine, so it's whatever, we're not going to worry about it. Because if you have that, if you start picking and choosing what you do and don't enforce the rules, then that leads to a whole host of new issues. So that's why I'm bringing this up. I'm bringing this up for the sake of completeness because there's clearly something going on here. And if there was any point for contention, this would be brought up. The only reason why it's being brought so briefly is because it literally does not matter. But you can't be picking and choosing where you do and don't enforce the rules. Regardless, if they're in the clear, they still have to do the due diligence and follow the rules, because if they don't, if you are just complicit and you pick and choose who does and doesn't have to follow the rules because it's close enough or it's good enough or it probably doesn't matter, then that leads to a whole big gray area that there shouldn't be. You have to enforce the rules as they're written. Now, when it comes to Yondaime, it literally doesn't matter because all of these events that he attended are also attended by the #2 player. If the thing would load, you can see next level play, the #3 player. In fact, everyone in the top 10, except for Smokey, WT, and one other player in here, I don't remember, are all attending only these tournaments. So it doesn't matter. And even Smokey, who is #6 on the leaderboard of 170 points, are attending these events. Heat Engager, Finar, I'm sorry, I don't speak the language, that has the same problem. It has 37 entrants and 0 DQs, and all of the other events in here have the same thing where they're not listing DQs. And so if you also exclude people that are attending those events, all of these players are attending these tournaments, and only these tournaments up until you get to the 22nd spot on the leaderboard with nice work. And even then, the only reason why is because even though this one event that he qualified for points for, got him 20 points on the leaderboard, it had 17 players and 0 DQs. But the only reason why this is because look at the 1-2s. It's more credible that there actually were no DQs for this event. But this is why it doesn't matter, because it's so deep-rooted in this entire region, just DQs, don't report them, don't matter, that it's not until you get to the 22nd spot on the MEA2 leaderboard, where if you enforce this and just strike all of the tournaments that didn't report the DQs properly like this, nice work would be the one going to Tekken World Tour Finals who has 1 first-place finish in a 16-player dojo, which is just absurd. So, and it's not, I don't think it's right at that point to be like that stingent where you basically invalidate the entire region. You know, like, it does come to a point, and I know now I'm kind of like picking and choosing myself, but it does come to a point where it's like, it's so deeper and you just kind of have to let it go. But in the future, you have to enforce this. You can't just be complicit, let it go. It doesn't work that way. And so now we finally get to the third musketeer in the cheating allegations, Noel. And Noel has been criticized for a very long time about cheating, about running ghost dojos, and I, throughout investigating all of this, look at Noel, and honest to God, I cannot say in good faith that Noel is explicitly cheating. In fact, when it comes to Noel's leaderboard placements, we discussed earlier, one of Noel's tournaments was falsely tiered by Bandai Namco themselves, and they reported the DQs properly, and it should have bumped them down a tier to 1 place. So when it comes to Noel and the tournaments Noel plays in, generally speaking, I don't think that Noel's at fault, and I don't think Noel's cheating. These claims of there being ghost dojos or that the brackets are being rigged or whatever is mostly hearsay. There's no actual evidence that points to that as a fact. And when you look at Noel's tournament placements, like if you look at Hadouken Capital Gamer, or if you look at Bloody Encounter, which I'll show here just a second, you can see that Hadouken Capital Gamer 2 has 106 entrants. And if you look at the DQs for this, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 DQs. And that brings the amount of entrants, yes, to 97, but look at the amount of games here that are going 1-2. Look, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. These are 0-2s, but you still have 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. And these are just in winners, right? Losers as well. You have 1-2s here and here. You have 1-2 here with the DQs, of course. 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Like you see how much healthier of a bracket this looks like than these other dojos that are cheating. That's the same thing with Bloody Encounter too. Now, Bloody Encounter only has 4 disqualifications, which is a very low number for this kind of tournament. But the other factor that would determine if this cheating is the amount of 0-2s that are also in here. And again, you can see that there is a relatively normal amount of 1-2s that you're seeing throughout this bracket. So if there has been cheating and if these are, quote, ghost dojos, they have done a very good job of hiding it. There are, yes, some indicators like this being so close to the 96 player threshold and this only having 4 DQs that there might be something going on. But when you look at the other evidence, this could just be circumstance. There is not other supporting evidence to back up that as a fact. And so that is an important thing to consider with Noel, is that most of the tournaments he's played in that have been accused of this don't have enough evidence to fully support that theory. Now, that said, there are a couple that Noel has played in that do raise suspicion. Infinite Fight 5 here is an example of this. It had 110 entrants, and if you look at the brackets, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 DQs. There are 9 full DQs in this tournament, which does put the amount of entrants at 101, which is above the 96. But you look at the 0-2s in comparison, especially in winners, and it becomes a little bit more suspicious. So you look here, 0-2s, you look here, 0-2s, but there's still enough 1-2s that it gives reasonable doubt. Like, yes, here, every single game in losers went 0-2. But then you look here and you got 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. So there is a significant amount of 0-2s, but it's not like so concrete that I'm sitting here, I'm like, this is definitely cheating. But there is one event that Noel attended that did raise suspicion, and that is Legion 501 GamerCon Bolivia, which had 102 entrants. And if you look at the brackets, there are 1, there's 1 full DQ, 1 partial, 2, 3, 4, 1 partial, 2 partials here, nothing here, nothing here, 1 partial here, 1 partial here. So a significant amount of partial DQs and 4 in total full DQs. And if you include the partial DQs, it would bring it below the 96 player threshold. So this is the one event, looking at it, that looks like may have been manipulated in the bracket. But the rest of these events really look normal. And this event also only gave Noel 100 points. His 5th highest placement dojo was this one with 70. So he'd only be getting, if this was manipulated, 30 points. But do I think that Noel specifically was cheating in this event? Do I think he was the mastermind behind this? No, I don't. Do I think that the majority of the events Noel has participated in are cheating? No, I don't. I mean, the evidence just isn't there. And if they have been cheating, they've done a very good job of covering it up. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? During my investigation, these dojo events have not done a good job of covering up anything that they're doing. There is always some sort of evidence that points to a consistent pattern or malicious intent behind the brackets and the dojo numbers and all of this other stuff. If they made an attempt to actually try covering it up, it would be impossible to be able to determine that a dojo was cheating. If there was a little bit more effort that was placed, like if you have an event with a low amount of DQs, but instead of listing those DQs as 2-0 and you list them as 2-1, that is going to give more credit to that event that those were actual people that participated and they weren't just disqualifications. But all of these events that have been suspected of cheating don't do that. They do not list a healthy normal amount of DQs. They don't keep the participants after the DQs not exactly on the number that is needed for the dojo tier status. They don't list games as going 1 and 2. They just blatantly out in the open do these things, and it makes it very easy to spot. But if they put in even a little bit of effort into hiding it, it would be impossible to find. And so maybe that's the case with Noel. Maybe the case with Noel, and I'm not accusing him of cheating, but I'm saying it is a possibility that these events are cheating. They aren't reporting DQs, but they're reporting players as going 1 and 2 to cover that up, and now it's impossible to tell. And the only way you would know is if you were physically at the event there yourself and you counted all of the people there, which no one is going to do. This is part of the problem with having a system like the Tekken World Tour dojo that's based on the honor system. You can't have any competitive anything that is based on the honor system, especially when it comes to how the Tekken World Tour dojos work, because it's so easy to cheat and cover it up. And it's incredible that no one has done that, it seems. But there may be other dojos, other events that are cheating and are covering it up, and we don't know because there's no way to be able to get that proof if they do cover it up. But then the other problem that comes from this is the potential for collusion. You see, Noel's team is HDG, and a lot of the players, a significant amount of the players that are in these tournaments are also on the same team, and quite a few of these events are organized by that team. So that might be a motive for why these events or these players cheat or throw their games, which is something that I have heard of before, is players throwing their games on stream to give one person points and then playing the actual game for the tournament off stream. That is something I've heard of. That is not in particular with Noel. That is just hearsay, but I have heard of it happening. However, there's no evidence to suggest that Noel is doing this, that Noel's team is doing this, but this is something I've been hearing about Noel for a long time. And this also wouldn't be doing different than a bunch of people in a community that are also trying to help someone else in their community do the same thing. The only difference with Noel is that Noel has a giant flashing sign on his back that says, I have people around me that do have a motivation to cheat in order to get me to the finals. That doesn't mean that is happening, but what it does mean is that there is a very clear motivation for that is clearly highlighted and outlined that we can explicitly see from Noel. And so I think that the reason why Noel has such a target on his back right now, even though I think of everyone that's talked about here, Noel is the least suspicious of anyone, is because of that giant neon flashing sign. And I think it shows how distrusting players are of how the dojo system works. And I don't blame them. I don't trust the system either. That's part of the reason why I'm making this video. There's proof that you shouldn't be trusting the system. And with how the system works with the honor system, and without having any way of knowing if someone is legitimate, not just cheating, but someone is legitimate, it makes sense for people to have this attitude, this disgruntled attitude, when you have someone that very clearly has a generous amount of support behind them and motivation for those other people to help him with this. It makes sense that you would be distrusting of someone like Noel, even though the evidence doesn't point towards Noel doing anything wrong or his team doing anything wrong. At the end of the day, the system is so flawed that you can't know for sure if they're doing it the right way. And that in and of itself is a major problem with how the Tekken World Tour dojos work. And so now we move on to the last region that's going to be talked about in this video and in the documentation, and that is the America 1 region. Now, to be clear, I don't think that there's any cheating or anything that's been going on in the America 1 region, but I do want to point out the America 1 region because it highlights a very crucial flaw with the dojo system. The America 1 region is huge. I talked about this in the beginning of the video, but it's so big that I can't compete because of the financial difficulty of it. And this is true for pretty much any player in the region. The region is so damn big that in order to be able to compete in any way, you have to travel across the country throughout the entire year. You have no other choice. And the other thing about the America 1 region as well is we do not have, like pretty much every other region, weeklies, bi-monthlies, even monthlies of any sort of dojo event that is 94, 64, even 48 players. They just do not exist. We are lucky to have 16-person dojo events a lot of the time. Unless you live in a major city, then you might have sometimes like maybe every month, 2 months, or 32, maybe a 48. But in order to be able to actually compete on the leaderboards, you have to do a lot of traveling. You have to travel around the country. And if you live in Canada, good luck. You basically have nothing that you can do because all of the 96 player events are in America. So it's like if you're in Canada, it's impossible. Depending on where you are in the United States, it's impossible. And because of that, you're going to have to spend quite literally thousands of dollars traveling around the country in the span of a year to even have a chance at competing at the Tekken World Tour finals. And what this means is, unlike a lot of regions, the TOs at the biggest events in the region are all different because they're at very different parts of the country. So not only are they not going to be the same person, they're probably not going to interact with each other. They may as well be from different regions entirely. And that also means that the TOs don't have incentive to be able to manipulate brackets or manipulate DQs or anything like that. So there's no reason to label your event as like a 96 player dojo because you want like a specific player to get higher on the leaderboard or people in your community to get higher on the leaderboard, because when you have those events, the majority of people that are going to be there are not going to be from your community. But the problem is, because of how much it costs to travel to these events in America 1, and because of how few 96 and 64 player events there are, because there are no weeklies, monthlies, bi-monthlies, anything like that in the America 1 region, it gives a monetary incentive for your dojo to be one of the few throughout the year to be a higher tier event, a 96 tier event. You already have to spend a ridiculous amount of money to be able to travel through the United States and just attend even a 64-player event. I can tell you, I did it once. I did one 64-player event this last season, in season 2, I should say, and it was within driving distance, and it still cost me about $400. So you can imagine when you have to fly to other places in the United States as well, and flights in the United States are not cheap depending on where you go. Like Tekken World Tour Finals, for example, when it was in St. Louis a couple of years ago, and I'm in Michigan, would have cost me $1,000 because of flights and travel. Same with Evo. Evo in Las Vegas cost me about $1,000. So when you're going to one of these 64 and 96 player events, if you're flying, you're probably paying about $1,000 to be able to go to each individual one. But the problem is, if you are one of those few places that have a 96 player event, competitors don't have any choice but to spend the thousands of dollars to be able to travel to your event, because if they don't, then they are at a significant disadvantage and probably are going to be unable to compete. So they have to. There's no choice in it. And so that's where the #1 player in the America 1 region, Victimo or Victim of Ritual, comes into play. Now again, no one here is cheating, but I'm bringing this up to highlight one of the fatal flaws with the dojo system. Victim of Ritual has been traveling around the country going to these events. And to give you an idea on how ridiculous it is to the cost and the travel and anything to be able to compete in this, I'm going to read out Victim of Ritual's qualifying tournament placements. He has 490 points on the leaderboard. He has one first place at a 96 player event, which is one of the lowest of any of the regions in general. But he has a second place at a 64 event that gave him 70 points. He has a first place at a 64 event. He has a second place at a 60 event. But he also has a fourth place at a 64 event, which gave him 30 points. And this is one of his qualifying tournaments. 30 points at a 64 player event for getting fourth. It's ridiculous, to put it mildly, how much you have to pay to travel. And again, what ends up happening here is that there was one tournament that Victim of Ritual went to that has a little bit of suspicion about it. And that's a tournament called Cream City Convergence 2025. And the reason why this is suspicious is because this event had 103 entrants in it, and it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 DQs, and it had 1 partial DQ. And so that brings the amount of DQs to 7, which puts the amount of entrants after that to exactly 96. Now, here's the thing. This is one tournament. This is one tournament that is a yearly. So we can't see if there's a pattern to this, because the TOs aren't hosting other events that are dojo events. They aren't hosting other major dojo events. They aren't hosting other tournaments. This is a one-off tournament, so we cannot prove one way or the other if they manipulated the bracket numbers. But there is a motive to doing that, and that's money. You see, if you look at the players that attended this, you have players like Shadow, Anakin, Victimo, the Mayor, Beast Infection. There are other players in here as well that didn't make top 8. And so because you have so many high-level players that are spending upwards of $1,000 traveling to Wisconsin, to play in this event, there is an incentive from the tournament organizers to make sure this event stays at 96 players. Because if it drops down to the 64-player bracket, these competitors aren't going to be getting their money's worth for this event. And it also means that a player like Shadow is going to be significantly hampered, not just on the regional leaderboard, but also on the global leaderboard. While Shadow didn't qualify for the Tekken World Tour finals with 1,230 points, 30 behind Fergus, one of his qualifying dojos is 0 points. If he was able to go to one more dojo or have like one of his, this one's Roundhouse, be a 96-player dojo, then he would have qualified for Tekken World Tour finals. But because of how messed up, how ridiculous the dojo system is and the region system is, he has a qualifying dojo combo starter that gave him 0 points. And so when you look at that, and you look then at Cream City Convergence, this is the 196-player event he went to where it got him first. So imagine if this had 95 players and it got bumped down to a 64-player event, and now he only got 100 points for this. This would be especially worse if he actually qualified for Tekken World Tour finals, and then we look at it in that lens. But still, it shouldn't matter in that regard. This is absurd. It's completely absurd that this is the way this works. But if this became a 64-player event, Shadow might be looking elsewhere with the money it costs to go here and the time and everything to a different event he can go to in the following year that is definitely going to be a 96-player event, because otherwise this is a waste of time and money. And so that is a major factor for a lot of these events in the United States and in America one in general is monetary reasons, because it costs a ton of money for the players. It's going to be really shit for them because of how the regions and the dojo is structured. If it goes below a 96-player event when they sign up for it, it means that like $1,000+ that you spend is worth basically nothing. It has an effect on the Tekken World Tour global leaderboards. It has a significant effect. And the regions are why you don't have any American players except for King Ray Jr. on the global leaderboards. So you can understand then what the motivation would be for everyone to keep this out of 96. Even if there are multiple players, even if it's not boosting one specific player, it's better for everyone in the region because it's an actual 96-player event. And it's very difficult for America to compete with our regions because the America 1 region is ridiculously big. It's way too big, and it makes it impossible for players in America 1 to compete, especially depending on where you live. But on top of that, it's good for the tournament as well because it helps grow the tournament, helps grow the scene, and it gives players a reason to come back in the following year because it's going to be one of the few 96-player events. And this entire concept, this entire idea goes against the spirit of the Tekken World Tour dojo system. there being this kind of monetary incentive for everyone to keep dojos like this is not what the Tekken World Tour dojo system is about. But unfortunately, it's a byproduct of how the regions work, and it was inevitable that this was going to be the case. It is a complete failure on how the system works from Bandai Namco. It should never be this way, and it doesn't encourage having the best player in the region go to the finals. Instead, it encourages the player that has the most amount of money and time to be able to travel to go to the finals. It is a completely flawed and ridiculous system, and this is why I'm bringing up America 1, because America 1 really highlights this. But it's not just America 1, right? This is a problem with the entire Tekken World Tour dojo system. When it comes to the cheating allegations in general, a lot of what this comes down to, a lot of what enables this to happen is how the regions are divided. If the regions weren't so big and vast and financially gatekept people from attending tournaments, this wouldn't be a problem. You wouldn't have a problem with being able to boost one player by boosting your own tournaments. You wouldn't have this problem of the financial incentive of keeping your event at a 96-player dojo. You wouldn't have this entire issue that revolves around dojo tiers, because that's what everything comes down to. Everything comes down to the tiers of the dojos and players not being able to attend events because it is outside of their range. Financially, they are not able to afford it. And again, I can tell you for myself, it's very frustrating because I cannot compete in the Tekken World Tour at all. It doesn't matter how good I am. It doesn't matter what my circumstances are. I am financially gatekept from participating in the Tekken World Tour in any way because of the financial cost of it. That's it. And because of that, I have absolutely no motivation to try competing in the Tekken World Tour. None at all. If I could compete in the dojo system, I might consider doing it, but I have absolutely no way to be able to compete. I just don't. It's outside of my reach. And it's deeply frustrating, and I'm sure it's deeply frustrating for other players as well, like in Oceania, who feel the same way, even though they're very strong players who feel like they can't compete because either financial restraints from having to spend $6,000 to travel around Australia, or because of the situation in Guam. And if you look at other regions that are a lot smaller, you look at South Korea, Japan, Pakistan, even MEA 2, there's no cheating. You know this, that the regions I didn't bring up in this video or in the documentation are the very small condensed regions. And that's because everyone in those regions can actually travel to each other's dojos and play against each other. And so that means that cheating is ineffective, because if you cheat by not reporting DQs at a dojo, guess what? Everyone can go to that dojo and it doesn't matter. It matters, yes, for the global leaderboard, sure, but it doesn't matter for the regional leaderboards, which is the main problem. MEA 2 as well, there is the evidence that was outlined in here of them not properly reporting DQs, but it doesn't matter because everyone in the region goes to the same events anyway. It's because of players' ability to be able to freely travel and it being reasonable financially to attend these events that these regions are actually competitive and don't suffer the same cheating problem that every other region does. Ultimately, the dojo system is supposed to allow the best player in each region to be able to participate in the global stage, supposed to be able to represent different regions that play Tekken, but it doesn't do this. Instead, it is a mix of someone who is good at the game and your financial ability to be able to compete, or if you got lucky in where you live, where you were born. Outside of that, it doesn't fulfill that core principle of the system. And because of that, the Tekken World Tour dojo system is a complete and utter failure. It goes beyond just the problem of cheating, of Bandai Namco not having oversight, of automatically looking at dojos and not verifying anything manually with a human. The entire system, the way it works, is completely rotten to its core. It does not work. It does not solve the issue it's trying to solve, and ultimately it is one of the most flawed competitive systems in any sport or esport ever. My proposed solution to how to fix the Tekken World Tour dojo system is introduce subregions. Ultimately, again, the problem of the dojo system is regions. The problem of the dojo system is how broad and vast regions are. If you separated regions into sub-regions that allowed players to be able to more reasonably travel to events, financially be able to afford to be able to go to different areas, this would not be a problem. Straight up. If you take Oceania as an example, and you split it into 8 different subregions, you have the different states of Australia, you have New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and Western Australia. Now, I'm not familiar with Australian geography, and I know there are large swaths of Australia that have basically no one in there. So this isn't like the perfect way to split this up, and you wouldn't be splitting it up by like these individual states, you would be splitting it up by different areas that have dojos or some sort of locals, of course. But this is just to serve as an example. You would have those 6 states, New Zealand and Guam. And so now, anything that's happening over there in Guam doesn't affect Australia. So when you have Bobby, who's trying to travel around Australia, spending $6,000 and still can't compete because of what's going on with Guam and being financially gatekept from going to Guam and competing in those events, instead, he doesn't have to spend the $6,000 flying around Australia traveling. He can go to his small events. If there's 1 or 2 16-person events that crop up, he can go to those. And then when he competes in his local scene within his region where it's financially reasonable for him to be able to attend these dojo events, all of the #1 players within their own subregions compete in a regional Swiss tournament, and the winner of that tournament goes on to represent the region in the Tekken World Tour finals. And so this would solve multiple issues. Not only would this solution solve the problem of cheating as a whole, but it would also solve the problem of the dojo system not accurately representing the top player in the region. Because now you are going to have all of the top players throughout the season in the region play each other and then determine who is the #1 player, and then that player moves on to the Tekken World Tour finals. Now, there's still problems with this. Like, for example, if you have Oceania split into all of these subregions and you have that top 8, where is it located? Where is that top 8 located? You know, that would be a question because of the financial cost of people in, say, Guam and New Zealand going to Australia. But like with the Tekken World Tour finals, Bandai Namco can pay for the travel. They do that for the Tekken World Tour finalists, at least allegedly they do. I've heard reports that they don't, but they should. And if they do, then it wouldn't be a problem. And if they stream these events, then that money that they make could be used to allow the competitors to be able to travel. This would also fix like America 1, and I can speak on this a little bit easier because I'm in America, but you would split America into Western America, not South America, Southern America, Central, Midwest, East. Canada, you would have all the different provinces. So you would have like Quebec, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, the other one that I don't remember, and I don't think anyone remembers. And then you would have Alaska, and it'd be fine. So then the problem becomes, well, what about like Hawaii? What about all of the minor islands that are within the region? And the problem there is that they are already, with how the system is, not competing in the Tekken World Tour. Again, if you are in Hawaii, you cannot afford to go to America, mainland America, and play in tournaments and qualify. So they already basically don't exist in how the Tekken World Tour works. But the way that they could become a sub-region is simply have dojos that meet a specific like player requirement. And if you do that, then boom, you can become a sub-region. That's how it would work. And it would be, and that means that every single place, no matter where you are, would be able to get representation in the Tekken World 2 as well, which again is part of how the region system is supposed to work. When you eventually stream these tournaments as well for the sub-regions, this would be great for lead up for the Tekken World Tour finals as well. Right now, we're sitting here in January, and October, November, December, January, the past couple of months, there has been nothing competitively for Tekken. Wouldn't it be great if there was something that led up to the Tekken World Tour finals, and having these 15 tournaments for the sub-regions to determine the #1 player would be great content for this. And in fact, they kind of did this during COVID when they had the online tournaments, kind of, but this would be fantastic for being able to fill in this extra space between now and the Tekken World Tour finals. And it would also be great for viewing for the actual regions that are competing as well. Can you imagine any of you that are in America one, or if you're in Europe one, looking at the top 8, 10, 12 players, or whoever it is in your region, all fighting it out against each other? Can you imagine, like in America one, you have a tournament that's just like King Ray Jr., Anakin, Victim of Ritual, all of these other players that are in the America one region fighting it out like the EWC? It would be fantastic for viewership for the Tekken World Tour. It would fix the cheating problems. It would fix the financial problems. It would fix pretty much all of the problems that the Tekken World Tour currently has. But as the Tekken World Tour is right now, it's a mess. It's a complete mess. It's ridiculous. If it wasn't a complete mess, then this video wouldn't be as long as it is, and my documentation on this wouldn't be as long as it is. There is so much going on. There are so many problems. This, even with cheating, with the financial problems, with traveling, with the regions, it is flawed to its core. And it's only going to get worse if this is continue to be left unchecked. I would love to be able to compete in the Tekken World Tour regional system. It would give me so much motivation to actually try and play this goddamn game. But I can't. I can't. I have no way to be able to compete in the Tekken World Tour. And that sucks. It's sad. I want to be able to compete. I want to be able to do this, but I can't. So I just don't care about this game or anything that's going on with it, because there's nothing I can do to stop it. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing this as well, why I'm making this video, why I've written this article, this Google document, why I have made this the biggest project I've ever undertaken in my life, and it's because I care. I really do. I care about Tekken. I care about the Tekken World Tour. I care about the dojos, and I care about the players that play in there, and I want it to get better. I can see a future where this is so much better than it is right now. I can see a future where this shines bright, and I hope that at one point it does, but it requires action from Bandai Namco. And I'm doing this in the hopes that this triggers some sort of action. This gets more people talking. This gets people to see just how deeply flawed this entire system is, because it's so much worse than anyone knows. And I hope if this video showed anything, it's exactly that. How flawed the system is, how bad the dojo system is, and how much it desperately needs to be changed. Thank you all very much for watching, and take care.